Okay, I don't remember seeing that. That's what I was
At this time, I'll call the Planning Commission meeting of August 20th, 2025 to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner McPhail.
Here.
Commissioner Bedard.
Here.
Commissioner Malikoff.
Present.
Vice Chair Mead. Here. And Chair Lee.
Present.
Thank you.
Would you please rise as you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Chairman.
Okay. And I just note for the other commission members that we don't have minutes from the last meeting, but they will be on our agenda for the next meeting. Moving to agenda item number 1, public comments. The public is invited to address the Planning Commission on any matter not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on an agenda item, please wait to be recognized under that item. Except for special circumstances, the Brown Act prohibits the Planning Commission or staff from responding or taking action on any comments made by the public unless it pertains to an item that appears on the agenda. All speakers should give their name and city of residence, and please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Do we have any requests to speak?
Mr. Chair, we have not received any requests to speak slips.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak?
Any members from the public who would like to speak? I see none.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, public hearing items. And for the benefit of those at home or in the auditorium, I just want to read you this statement. This information is for members of the public attending this meeting or watching at home. The public hearing will proceed as follows. Staff will present the proposed resolution and commission members will ask staff questions related to that presentation. The public hearing will then be opened for public comment. Anyone wishing to comment on this agenda item will be given up to 3 minutes to speak on the item in question. The public hearing will then be closed. The commission members will then discuss the proposed resolution and may propose a motion to adopt the resolution as presented, propose amendments to it, or reject the resolution. Thank you. And we have a staff report.
Yes, good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Andrew Firestein, your Director of Community and Economic Development, and I have a presentation for you this evening. So as I lead into this presentation, I just want to preface this with some thoughts, and those thoughts really are, we have a complex problem that is in search of a complex solution. And this evening, you are considering a complex solution. We are considering amendments to the city's cannabis ordinances across multiple chapters of the code. Ordinarily, you work in our zoning code, but for this presentation, you are hearing everything, and that is to ensure that you are understanding the full context of the updates to the city's cannabis regulations. This is also a little bit different in the sense that we have regulations today, and we have a robust cannabis industry within the community. We have an odor problem, and we are working through a solution on that odor problem. As we work through that solution, staff's approach for this presentation on the draft ordinance was to look for a balance, and that is respecting the needs of residents of the city of Cathedral City, while also recognizing that these are existing businesses. There are jobs within those businesses, and there is an economic impact associated with the cannabis industry. So the ordinance tonight was prepared with balance in mind, looking for a solution that addresses the core issue, the core problem at hand, while also still putting the city in a position where we can say that we're open for business and that we're responsive to the needs of industry. The city has existing ordinances regulating the licensing of medical and adult use cannabis. and establishing the zoning and land use requirements for cannabis businesses. These were initially adopted in 2017 and were last amended in 2022. Cathedral City has 59 cannabis businesses with 97 licenses. We have seen a large increase in the number of cannabis odor complaints. At the beginning of 2024, we had 38 cannabis odor complaints across a 3-month period of time. And then over the remaining 9 months of 2024, we received over 900 additional cannabis odor complaints, including 220 in November and 501 in December. That has increased since then. Right now, we're not in a peak season. A lot of the residents adjacent to C4 Industry have gone back to their primary place of residence. So that has decreased over the summer months, but the cannabis odor still exists in that area. Complaints have been reported across the city. I don't want to convey that this is strictly a C4 Industry, that this is strictly an issue with the Date Palm Drive and Ramon Road area. We have received complaints elsewhere in the city, and even as staff, as we step out of City Hall, we recognize that there are cannabis odor issues on the Perez Road corridor area. So in response to the cannabis odor complaints, staff engaged with cannabis enforcement staff in other Coachella Valley cities. We engaged in dialogue and discussion with the Department of Cannabis Control at a state level. We evaluated cannabis odor control regulations in other cities. We also increased our staff training. We sought to create a cannabis enforcement guide and to initiate inspections of cannabis businesses, not just for the purpose of a business license, but for code enforcement. We developed patrol routes for cannabis odor detection using both our code compliance staff as well as the Cathedral City Police Department. And this was to collect additional information, additional data on cannabis odor complaints and issues across the city. We've also required additional cannabis odor mitigation. Despite these efforts, the complaints continue to come in, and our proactive patrols continue to identify odor issues, and we've not been able to address that up to this point. This led Council to enact a moratorium in January of 2025. Council initially enacted a 45-day initial moratorium on the approval of new cannabis licenses and conditional use permits and the issuance of building permits for the build-out or expansion of new cannabis businesses. They extended this initial moratorium on February 26, 2025 by 10 months and 15 days, and we're currently in that moratorium period. Since Council adopted the moratorium, staff has continued its research. It has evaluated the city's zoning, locational requirements, definitions, standards, and enforcement provisions, fines and penalties. We've compared this to many other cities and counties. We've also obtained consultant support. We realized that we got to a point where we've done as much as we can as a staff, and we needed to bring in additional subject matter experts to support any measure the city were to develop. We've also launched a cannabis odor control reporting and monitoring pilot program that is currently in place. And we've prepared a comprehensive ordinance amending the city's cannabis regulations, including cannabis tax, licensing, zoning, and enforcement. That's the subject of the presentation tonight. So let's get into this a little bit more. I did mention C4 Industry, and just to back up a little bit, tonight's presentation is not about C4 Industry, although it is part of what we're discussing. So related specifically to C4 Industry, we have also engaged with another consultant on odor emissions. That consultant has helped us understand the odor emissions problem at C4 Industry. C4 Industry itself has applied for a building permit to install additional odor control equipment, and that is still in process. They have a temporary certificate of occupancy to operate. We've expressed to them that they need to resolve their odor issues prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So,
Director, could I just interrupt a second?
Of course.
I'm not sure if everyone on the commission is familiar with who C4 are. So if you can give a little background, and if there are other questions as we go through, it's a long presentation, so please make those questions when they come up.
And I encourage that. It is a long presentation. We've got about 40 slides, and I know you haven't been with us every step of the way as we've gone through this exercise, so I want to make sure that I'm going through deliberately so that you have the information you need in consideration of the ordinance. So C4 Industry is a large indoor cultivator located in the vicinity of Date Palm Drive and Ramon Road. This is a facility with over 200,000 square feet of cultivation space. They began construction some years back, but began bringing online their grow areas in 2024, and it was as their grow areas were coming online, as we were issuing temporary certificates of occupancy for those incrementally, that we started to see those odor complaints coming in the vicinity of Date Palm Drive and Ramon Road. So beyond C4 Industry, some of the other actions that we've taken, and I think this is reflective of the increased accountability that we've placed on the industry. We're looking to them to really be responsible for their business, be responsible for the odors that are generating. We're expecting them to operate under the code. And as we've put code in a more primary role, as code has taken on a more direct role with the enforcement of our cannabis regulations, we have taken action. And I think that's important to call out tonight as well. We have led the revocation of a conditional use permit on Kiley Road. This was for repeated code violations and illegal activity at that site. There was ample reason to support the revocation of that conditional use permit. We have also performed an inspection of a property that had a conditional use permit and previously had licenses for cannabis cultivation, but at the time we received a complaint about it, there was no cannabis license for cultivation in effect at the time. So we received a complaint that there may be activity occurring within that space. Code compliance conducted an initial inspection, observed that there was in fact activity there. That was turned over to the Cathedral City Police Department and the Coachella Valley Narcotics Task Force, served search warrants for that property and another property, seizing over 10,000 cannabis plants. So another action that's been taken to just increase accountability within the space. And the last one, this is a more traditional code compliance case, but up until this point, when we've done inspections for an annual renewal of a business license, it's been led by each division. So, planning might go out and look at specific conditions related to their purview. Fire might go out and look at specific conditions related to their purview. But this is an example where code led a multi-division inspection with planning, building, fire, even Riverside County. And there were multiple violations of our cannabis regulations detected. They led an effort to use the enforcement provisions in our code to issue citations and to take corrective action. So that is still an open case, but I share it with you tonight in the sense that we are looking to increase accountability. So getting into our current cannabis regulations. Cannabis uses may be permitted as a conditional use in our planned community commercial PCC, commercial business park, CBP2, and light industrial zoning districts. That's our regulation as it stands today. As you know, the PCC zoning district is the most common commercial zoning district in the city. This is typified by retail uses and shopping areas throughout the city. Date Palm Drive, Ramon Road, those are typically zoned PCC. CBP2 and I-1 zoning districts, those are generally clustered around Perez Road. Those are the business parks and industrial parks within the city. This table was presented to you in November of last year by staff. It gives you a sense of where all of these uses are permitted. The MUU, MUN, those are also shown on the slide. That's the North City specific plan. There was an amendment to the North City specific plan to allow cannabis uses there. We have not addressed that in this ordinance. That is something that we would potentially want to consider through an amendment to that specific plan. Notwithstanding the North City specific plan, this gives you a sense of the uses and where they're permitted. I would call attention to cultivation being permitted within the PCC zoning district. That's one of the changes that we'll discuss tonight. SCS engineers, I'll introduce them in a moment. They are present this evening and available for questions on odor science, on odor control plans, really any of the technical information that's in the report they conducted for the city. They produced several graphics that I have on these slides. This was also in your report. Gives you a sense of the dispersion of cannabis uses today within the city. So on this slide, these are all of the cannabis businesses that exist in the city today. And as we proceed through these, you'll see where we have cultivation. Cultivation is principally clustered on the Perez Road corridor. The exceptions to that, there is one on Day Palm Drive, and we also have, and I apologize it's not shown on here, C4 Industry at Day Palm and Ramon. Continuing through this, dispensaries, these are dispersed across the city. You do have a few closer to Vista Chino and Day Palm Drive, some on Ramon Road, and then others concentrated around Palm Canyon and the Perez Road corridor. Distribution only, there are licenses for that along Perez Road corridor and also along Palm Canyon, and you do have one on Ramon Road. Manufacturing, not much manufacturing in the city, just the licenses you see there. And microbusiness. Microbusiness is a state license that combines 3 or more. This could be a dispensary, could be cultivation, could be manufacturing. It's 3 or more license types. That's a specific state license. And then we have the testing labs. Not many testing labs within the city either. So continuing on with a review of the city's current regulations, we do have separation requirements, and those separation requirements are shown on this slide. You have in this column schools, daycare centers, and youth centers. That's 600 feet, that is set by the state. Then we have residential zones, 250 feet from dispensaries and 300 feet for cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution sites, and then resort residential. Resort residential, this includes many neighborhoods, perhaps more than we might think at first. This includes Desert Princess, Outdoor Resort Palm Springs, Desert Shadows RV Resort, Cathedral Canyon Country Club, Canyon Shores, Date Palm Country Club, Cathedral Palms RV Resort, and the District, just to name some. So we have a separation requirement between dispensaries and resort residential, but we do not have a separation requirement between cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and resort residential in the code today. And there are instances where we have sites adjacent to resort residential. The most prominent is Outdoor Resort Palm Springs, where we've realized the conflict with C4 Industry, but that's not the only one. We do have other areas where we have cannabis uses that are adjacent to resort residential. The most prominent example of that is the Cathedral Palms RV Resort that is adjacent to Kiley Road and some of the uses on Kiley Road. And there are others too that are in close proximity. This is an area where we have seen some of the conflict, where we have residents, even those that are here seasonally, that are in close proximity to cultivation uses.
I might be jumping ahead, but tell me if I am. The amphitheater, that's the MXC zone, right?
Correct, yes.
So how far would a cultivation facility have to be across the street in the MBP, the industrial district?
CBP2?
The CB2, would the amphitheater be one of those disqualifying land uses?
No. That is not one of the land uses today that is that has a separation requirement.
Could the, again, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but could the amphitheater be considered a place where children go?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Could the amphitheater that we have be considered a place where children frequent?
Potentially. I would say that if we were to consider a separation requirement from the amphitheater, we may want to define that a little bit more specifically. And that's something I think we can get to. I would suggest let's continue with the presentation, and as the Planning Commission gets to a point of deliberation, that may be something for the Planning Commission to discuss. So continuing, this is the condition of approval that I'm sure you've seen as you've processed a conditional use permit for cannabis use. This defines a no odor standard at the property line. And we do require cannabis businesses today to provide an odor control system. What's lacking, though, is a verification step. So this is required during the entitlement process, but we have no means of verifying how effective that system is in mitigating the cannabis odor generated by the use. Typically, those systems are included as a mechanical sheet in a building permit plan set, and they're reviewed against the California Building Code for compliance with building code standards. But today, no one is reviewing the equipment for its effectiveness to mitigate cannabis odor. So we have a standard, no odor at the property line. We have a requirement that they're providing an odor control system, but we don't have a verification step. And we'll get to how we propose to change that here in the presentation. Stepping into Title 13, this is our enforcement provisions in the code. We have a standard here as well that has no odor at the property line. It is a public nuisance to cause or permit persistent cannabis odors that are offensive to individuals of normal sensitivity and which adversely impact or unreasonably interfere with the use and enjoyment of property. And this is at the property line. So that is the standard that we have in the code. What we don't have is sufficient detail on how we are to enforce a cannabis odor violation. Right now, it is a $100 citation, and I'll share with you now that is not effective in terms of deterring violations of this section of code. As well, we don't have a very good process on what do we do when we detect cannabis odors. We could lead into an investigation as we do with any other case, but the challenge with cannabis odors, it's transitory. When we get a complaint, by the time we send a code officer out to inspect it, maybe days later, we're not detecting that odor. So there are challenges with the enforcement section of code. It's insufficient, it's inadequate as it's currently written, and we'll share with you as we get into the presentation how we propose to address that. So we have conducted research in other cities. We looked at the Department of Cannabis Control first and foremost, and this really is recognizing that we have a large indoor cultivation facility with C4 Industries. So our initial thought is, who else is like us? Is there anyone else out here in the state of California that we can model? Is there another city or county that has a similar sized facility that we could look at, that we could see that has sensible regulations that we could adapt here in Cathedral City? So we did research with the DCC and looked at just how many other large indoor cannabis cultivation facilities there were in the state. And what we found, there are 7. 5 in Oakland, 1 in Richmond, and ours in Cathedral City. And ours is the only purpose-built facility. The others were adaptive reuse, older industrial buildings. They're also not in areas where they're in close proximity to residential, to an RV resort. Ours is different in that sense. I would add too that C4 Industry is probably the largest of all of those. We were not able to determine exactly how large those other facilities are, but looking at aerial photographs, all but one of those are distinctly smaller than C4 Industry. So we're exceptional in that sense. We then looked at all cities across the state that permit indoor cannabis cultivation. And the thought there was, okay, well, maybe someone else, even if they don't have a large indoor cannabis cultivation use, has regulations that we could look at. So we looked at all other California cities and counties, found 84 permit indoor cannabis cultivation. Staff looked at 84 codes and regulations. That was cursory. The intent there was to see, which codes were modern, which codes had something of interest, which codes had something that potentially could be utilized here in Cathedral City. And we narrowed that down to 15 cities and 3 counties to research further. As we got into that more, we came up with a set of 7 zoning questions, 4 enforcement questions. that we use to probe all of those codes. And that research is in your packet. That was part of the April 23rd staff report to City Council. I won't go into it in much depth because what we found was there's nothing out there that we can directly adapt and model. We are, in a certain sense, leading the solution. And that's an instance where we need to innovate, we need to create. There are ideas that we can take from other cities. We did look intensely at Palm Springs, at Desert Hot Springs, and Coachella, for instance. Those were some of the better codes. And we did look at some of the better ideas in those other codes too. But the solution you have is a compilation of those best ideas, and as well putting forward ideas that make sense in Cathedral City. After the presentation on April 23rd to City Council, we did go under contract with SCS Engineers to provide additional support to the city. They are subject matter experts, and they are represented here tonight. So we do have SCS Engineers available to answer questions you may have on cannabis odors, odor science, odor control plans, beyond those that city staff can answer. As part of our contract, we asked them to take the work that we did, looking at the regulatory review, looking at those best practices, to take that further, and that they've identified odor control technologies, that they've identified best practices that we were able to integrate into the draft ordinance that you have. They also worked with us to build out an odor control permitting process. There are checklists in the report that we intend to use as part of the implementation, and we will continue to work with them on training post-adoption of an ordinance. So getting into the content of the report, Appendix A, that this is an in-depth assessment of cannabis odors. I won't go any further than what's on this slide. I mentioned they are industry experts, and they are available to answer more specific questions you may have on cannabis odors. In the report, they evaluated different cannabis uses and the odor generating potential of those uses. You'll see that cultivation is a high odor generating use. Beyond that, we have consumption lounges that are also a high odor generating use, whereas dispensaries are a low odor generating use. And this is important in the sense that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Our code today, the conditional use permit condition of approval, that is sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. You're required to provide an odor control system, and there's no odor to be detected at the property line. We apply that to every CUP that we see. What we know, though, is that not all uses are the same, that the odor generating load is different by cannabis use, and a more adaptive solution is needed. That's where SCS Engineers has recommended an odor control plan process. So the contents of an odor control plan are specific to the use. The odor control plan itself identifies the odor emitting activities, processes, method. It identifies the odor emitting activities as part of the use, together with the processes, methods used for odor control and complaint management. There are checklists for each of these odor control plans. So there is a different checklist for cultivation than there is for a lounge, than there is for a dispensary. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but it's intended to be calibrated to the impacts of that particular use, and it gives flexibility. It gives the designer the ability to choose what equipment goes into that facility to mitigate the odor, to result in no odor at the property line.
Sorry, just a quick question. Did you say there weren't any testing labs?
We do have testing, yes.
Oh, okay, because it's not, so we're not concerned about the testing labs at all?
It is,
I thought there was
low-
one on Ramon and near the bowling alley.
I think there's 2 testing. I have to go back and look
Okay.
at the map, but
But we're not doing any sort of there's no checklist for testing. Are we less concerned just because the odor possibility is less?
so they would still be required to do an odor control plan. I apologize if there's not a checklist in
No,
there.
that's fine. I just wanted to
The contents for that would be geared to the use itself. So that is a low odor generating use. and it would go through a less onerous process. Really, the expectations are more for a cultivator. They would be required to put more information into that. In all likelihood, they would be putting in more equipment than a dispensary or some of those low
Got it.
odor generating uses.
Okay, thanks.
So this is a sample of what that checklist template looks like. This one is for a cultivation or a manufacturing use, so you get a sense of what is asked or what is required as part of that. You've got the odor control system design, administrative controls. Really, those are processes, engineering controls. This is equipment, and beyond that, you've got your maintenance requirements and staff training. So as we get into this further, you'll see that this really serves as the foundation for the system that the business is proposing to mitigate the cannabis odor. And it's also what we use from an enforcement standpoint to ensure that we're maintaining accountability. So that conversation when we get into the enforcement slide starts with, let's pull out the odor control plan, let's see what's working, what's not working, and that gives us the tool to have a more intelligent conversation about odor control and enforcement. So SES has recommended to the city a technology agnostic and performance-based approach. So we're not leading with the solution, but we're providing the designer the flexibility to choose what is suitable for that particular business. And again, our standard is no odor at the property line. So as long as that's our goal, no odor at the property line, and it's the designer's responsibility to select equipment to design a system that achieves that. That encourages or ensures flexibility and as well a code that is resilient as technology changes, as there's new technology coming out, that we're not locked into outdated technologies. Table 1 in the report does provide an overview of multiple odor control technologies, and SCS engineers can get into that in more depth than staff. So from here, I want to pivot and get into the contents of the proposed ordinance. So we've got 5 sections to step through, and that starts with zoning regulations, getting into odor control plans, and then into some of the other sections for you. So we are proposing to remove cultivation as a conditional use within the PCC zoning district. We are one of the few, if not the only city that I could find that allows cultivation in a commercial zoning district like this. And you know, if we had the opportunity to go back in time, I think this is something we would reconsider in the sense that PCC is in close proximity to residential areas. It's in close proximity to sensitive receptors, and we know now that allowing cultivation in the PCC zoning district has created conflict. We can't change that. That CUP has been approved. That's an existing entitlement. Working through that, enforcing that, that's a separate issue than what we're discussing tonight, but removing cultivation as a conditional use within PCC ensures that we're not doing that again. Existing cultivation within the PCC that would remain as a legal non-conforming use, and cultivation would remain a conditional use within the CBP2 and I1 zoning districts.
Could you just expand on that? C4 would become non-conforming.
That's
They can
correct.
still operate, but what are the legal implications for non-conformance?
So a legal non-conforming use means that they can continue to operate until that use is abandoned, which essentially is it's discontinued for a period of 90 days or longer. At that point, that use would be deemed extinguished. It also limits their ability to expand the use.
And if C4 were to sell that property to another company, would
They could, yes. Someone could take ownership of that. They could acquire the license and continue to operate so long as it were not abandoned.
And even though they're a non-conforming use, later in your presentation, I read, you're going to go into the odor control mechanisms for existing and new,
Yes,
and they will not be exempt from that, even though they're a non-conforming use. So
Correct.
they'll have a time frame that they need to comply,
yes,
regardless of being a non-conforming use.
correct. And I will address that here in a couple of slides. So we are also proposing to add a 300-foot separation requirement between cultivation, manufacturing, distribution sites, and any property zoned resort residential. This is creating an equivalency between resort residential and residential for that use. So new uses that are coming in, they would be required to meet that standard. Anything that,
Okay, I have a question on this one. So the resort residential not only is something where people live, but we have schools, such as the King's School, that are in the resort residential. So would they have to follow the resort residential rule or the distance from a school?
well, in that case, the school would require a 600-foot buffer, so that would be the greater, the more restrictive buffer.
So if you're a school in the RR district, then whatever the distance, or something, if you're in two different classes,
It would be the greater.
whatever one has the largest distance is the
Correct.
one you would have to follow.
Yes.
So for instance, if somebody wanted to open one near the King's School, I don't know if I'm not supposed to mention their name, but I'm concerned. Then it would have to be 600 feet, not 300, which is the RR requirement.
Correct, and that 600-foot requirement from a school exists in the code today, so that is not being changed.
And that would also be 600 from any public school.
School has a specific definition, but yes, schools, daycare centers, youth centers, that is a 600-foot separation requirement today, and that is not changing.
And then, okay, I'll wait till we get to places of worship.
Okay. So continuing on, we're also proposing modifications to the standard conditions of approval. And really, this is a simplification of the condition of approval to require an odor control plan and to eliminate redundant language. This does refer to Title V and the specific odor control plan requirements where there are specific submittal and content requirements for an odor control plan. So there's a simplification of the conditional use permit condition of approval. Stepping into odor control plans, so this is within Title V. This is proposed as a new section of the Cannabis Licensing Code. The review of an odor control plan, this is intended to evaluate its effectiveness to mitigate cannabis odor. So that the gap that I mentioned earlier, where we don't have the ability to verify whether an odor control system is designed appropriately to mitigate those cannabis odors, this is intended to fill that gap. The standard remains no odor at the property line. The cannabis license renewal regulations, they are also proposed to be modified to require existing businesses to obtain approval of an odor control plan as a requirement of their local license renewal beginning January 1st, 2026. So this will apply to new businesses going forward and then retroactively to existing businesses as they're going through a renewal process. If there is additionally required odor control equipment, through the review of that odor control plan, that cannabis business would have up to 6 months to install that cannabis odor control equipment or by December 31st, 2026. So this is intended to be phased in over the course of 2026. There is an important note here, though, and we'll see this when we get into Title 13 and the enforcement section. If we get a verified cannabis odor complaint against a business and they have not yet completed that odor control plan, they would be required to submit an odor control plan within 30 days as opposed to the phased implementation. So for businesses that are operating as usual, where there's not a cannabis odor complaint, where there's not an issue with cannabis odors, they would simply be required to submit that odor control plan as part of their license renewal. But where we are having odor issues, where there are verified cannabis odor complaints, that would be accelerated.
Can I ask a question here? This was a question I had sent to you in advance, too. So it says the review of an odor control plan is proposed to evaluate its effectiveness to mitigate cannabis odors. Who is evaluating the plan? Do we have the technical expertise in-house, or
We do not.
is a consultant staying on hand to, I mean, how do we know that it's going to be viable and work?
I appreciate that. So as the ordinance goes forward to City Council, it will be presented with 2 companion resolutions. One of those resolutions will be setting fines, and we'll touch on that in a moment. The other is setting fees, and that fee is intended to be a cost recovery for fees incurred by the city for the review of an odor control plan. We intend to contract out all but the dispensaries, the retail dispensaries. We do not have that expertise on city staff to review those. So the way that we've structured the schedule, the fee that is charged to us by the consultant, we would recapture that through the fee. We're also building in 4 hours of staff time. This is for the processing of the odor control plan as well as to conduct inspections. It's our intent to conduct regular annual inspections led by code compliance to verify the performance of the odor control equipment and systems that are in place. So we'll have checklists for our staff. They'll be trained to conduct the inspections. That's part of our contract with SCS
Great.
Engineers.
Okay.
But we intend to refer out the
Okay.
review of the odor control plan.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Is that firm here tonight?
They are, yes.
And are they, I think I know who they are. I'm just guessing. I assume they're a local firm then, so that when there's an issue, that they can address it in a timely manner rather than coming from Escondido?
They have an office in Santa Maria? Santa Maria, El Centro. They've been very responsive, though. And
But there's no office here.
there's no office here at the Coachella Valley. The odor control plans are an entirely electronic submittal. So that would be received through our CSS portal like any other application, and we would be able to send the plans to them electronically. So I don't see an issue with their ability to process or be responsive to the review of an odor control
They
plan.
don't need to go do an inspection, they
No.
just need to review the plans and
Correct.
say, this is wrong, send it back to staff in a blue
Bluebeam,
beam, thank
Yes.
you. Send it back to them in Bluebeam and say, this is what needs to be fixed.
yes.
So then the local presence isn't a necessity.
I don't see local presence as a necessity. We'll get into this in a coming slide, but we can request a cannabis business to conduct an odor assessment. If there is some debate over the presence of cannabis odors at the property line, the intensity of cannabis odors, we can request an odor assessment. That, though, would be conducted by the business, not necessarily the city. And in that case, the business would select a qualified firm to perform that odor assessment, and that would require someone to be on site in all likelihood.
I think, I agree with Vice Chair Mead in that in the past, we've never really had somebody that had that expertise. Just like we really don't have anybody that can measure photometrics. We want somebody here in this position that can measure and deal with the odor, the details of odor control so that we don't ever run into this problem again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question, just to follow up with what you guys have just been discussing, is so the business submits a plan. They say, we're going to put in ABC control systems. It goes to the expert says, this looks good. How, when someone from code compliance goes out to review what's actually been put in, do they have the expertise to go, oh, this complex system, that's what I'm seeing here?
We will get training so that we
Okay.
know what we're looking at when we conduct
Okay.
inspections, yes. So getting into the enforcement provisions, shared with you where we're starting from. So we have language that declares persistent cannabis odors, offensive to individuals of normal sensitivity. It goes on, that's a nuisance violation of the code today. So we are maintaining that standard while also establishing an enforcement process centered on an odor control plan. And the best way to illustrate that is through a graphic. So we have essentially 3 paths. There's cannabis odor, so we detect cannabis odor, we get cannabis odor complaint that's been verified. There's 3 paths that we can go. On the top, this is with an approved odor control plan, and this is where we want to operate. This is where we want it to be. So we've worked with a business, they've submitted, they've received approval of a cannabis odor control plan, they've installed odor control equipment, they're doing things right. If we detect cannabis odor in that instance, this starts with a written warning. So we're working to inform and educate that cannabis business that there's an issue, that there's a problem. At that point, it's on the cannabis business to take corrective action. So we're giving them 10 days to investigate, evaluate, and to respond to that written warning and to let us know what's going on. We can grant additional time as may be needed for them to implement additional corrective actions. At some point, we'll conduct a reinspection and see, are there still cannabis odors detected at that property line? If there are, then we're looking at a potential citation. And I mentioned to you that there is a fine resolution going to City Council. Right now, we are estimating that that fine in this first tier would be a $1,000 fine. So we're giving the business the opportunity to correct the problem before we go out and do a reinspection. And we are intending to work cooperatively with the cannabis business in this position, using that odor control plan as really the foundation for that discussion. Use the odor control plan to identify what you should be doing. Is something wrong? Correct it, and let's do a reinspection.
Just to clarify there, you said, so they have 10 days to take corrective action, but then you
Yes.
said at some point in the future we do a reinspection. Shouldn't it be day 10?
It can be. We can also grant additional time. For instance, if they needed to install additional cannabis odor equipment, if they were in need of a part and that part had a lead time, we have the ability in this case to grant them additional time before we do that reinspection.
Okay.
So
Does it say that specifically in the
it is specific in the ordinance, yes,
Okay.
that there's discretion.
10
that
days, or if they have applied for additional time?
Correct. There is
Okay.
language in there that grants the ability for code staff to grant additional time. There
Okay.
is discretion built in.
When it gets to citation, where do they go for the citation? Because I found, in my experience over the years, that judges do not care about code enforcement. They don't care about fences, they don't care about odors, they don't care about those kinds of things. And they just think that there's more important things for them to be doing than this. So when it gets to the citation, do we have our own board that deals with it and that has that kind of administrative remedy to replace what a useless judge would do? Sorry. Or if there's any judges listening, sorry, but it's true. Because I found that once it gets in I found that once a code enforcement issue gets into the court system, that there's very little interest by the judges in correcting it or providing fines, no matter how onerous it is to the people around them. So we're going to have our own group that will do the own enforcement and their own bail schedule for what those fines will be.
So we have a code enforcement staff today. This would be managed by our code enforcement staff. We are proposing a fine resolution, and part of what you see in the ordinance is a consolidation of administrative fines across multiple sections of code, and that standardizes the admin fines within the code, and it also allows the City Council to adopt greater fines by resolution. That's our intent here, is to adopt a greater fine by resolution. $1,000 in this first tier. We're about to get into that second tier. That's a $5,000 fine. So the intent here is to allow code compliance to issue that citation, $1,000, $5,000. There is an appeal process. That appeal process would go through a hearing officer, and there would be additional remedies beyond the hearing officer. I do want to mention that we have Brandon Sanchez here tonight. Brandon worked closely with us on the ordinance. And for legal issues, for enforcement questions, Brandon is a subject matter expert and can assist us in that
It
sense.
sounds good that we can keep it in-house rather than it getting bogged down in a twisted judicial system that really doesn't care about code enforcement.
And I can speak to the process. So again, hi, I'm Brandon Sanchez with Burke Williams and Sorensen, and I'm a code enforcement attorney. This is cannabis attorney. This is what I do. And once a fine is issued, you're talking about the court process. How it would end up in court is first there is an administrative appeal. So a hearing officer supplied by the vendor that processes the citations would act as the hearing officer and hear the appeal. And typically, in most cases, those fines are upheld. And then once that administrative layer of appeal is complete, the individual or company would have 20 days to appeal to the Superior Court. And it's kind of a condensed civil process, so it's not a full-blown trial or anything like that. It happens on a shorter time frame, and the judge in that situation is just sort of calling balls and strikes whether or not there was a code violation or not. They don't typically reduce the fines or waive the fines. They're just hearing evidence and determining whether or not there was a violation of the code. And if it's upheld, then the fine is final at that point. So there's kind of a two-step process. The first is in-house, sort of, with the hearing officer.
Thank you.
So getting into the second tier, so we covered a business that has an approved odor control plan. For those businesses that do not have an approved odor control plan, or they've failed to comply or maintain an odor control plan, they go into this tier. Now, we recognize before December 31st, 2026, there may be businesses out there that don't have an odor control plan because they haven't been required to submit one yet. So in that case where we have cannabis odor, that business would be required to submit an odor control plan within 30 days. If they do not, then we're looking at a citation. If they do, then we're going to move up into that first tier. Below that,
Sorry, those businesses would actually only be ones that were renewing their license late in the year, so they've got to have it in place by the time they do their renewal in 2026.
yes, in the ordinary course, a cannabis business would be required to submit an odor control plan as a condition of that license renewal over the course of 2026. Now, for those where we receive a cannabis odor complaint, we are going to accelerate that process.
Right.
And that's the process I just described, where we receive a cannabis odor complaint, they don't have an odor control plan yet. That would trigger them to submit an odor control plan within 30 days. If they do not, then we're looking at a citation process.
I just want to be clear that businesses can't wait until December next year to submit their plan.
Yes,
It
this
has
is
to be part
required
of
as
their
part of the
renewal.
renewal.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Oh, you go.
Doesn't the trigger you just mentioned of a complaint speeding things up, does that not invite the public to make complaints to speed things up?
It could. We would ensure that's a verified complaint. So
Yeah.
this is a direct observation by city staff. This is a verified complaint from the public. But there are cases where we know, and in fact, I would say C4 Industry, it's likely that they would be one of the first to be required to submit an odor control plan. We know there is an odor issue still at C4 Industry. This will require them to comply to submit that odor control plan sooner than their license renewal date.
So you have to do some evaluation, it's a valid complaint, people are just not going to say,
Correct.
it's a complaint, and then they have to work. There is a process to verify it's a real complaint, so that's good.
Yes. So notwithstanding those businesses that have not yet submitted an odor control plan, it may be the case that a business has an odor control plan, has failed to follow the maintenance schedule, has failed to comply with it. That can happen as well. In that case, that business would have 30 days to fully comply with the requirements of Chapters 5.88 and 9.108 before a citation. And you'll see on the right there, 3 or more citations may constitute a finding of good cause for license revocation or denial. And that's important. We have the language for good cause in the code today, but what this is saying is that cannabis odor issues, unabated, failure to comply with an odor control plan could potentially escalate to revocation, suspension of a license, or the denial of a license renewal. That's a pretty big threat. We don't mean to use it unless we have to, but our goal here is to maintain accountability. Our goal here is to put in meaningful enforcement provisions between the fines and the penalties, that direct action, that compel action. So the last tier, this is unlicensed activity. This is clearly a case where it's not allowed by the cannabis license, not allowed by the CUP. That's a citation and can lead to good cause for license revocation or denial.
Would I don't know if you can answer this, but, you know, like CEQA judges go through CEQA judges go through training so that when a CEQA case comes, not any judge can just take it. It has to be a judge that's been trained for CEQA and that actually understands it. Is there training for this, that a judge can have a reasonable knowledge of this for how this works?
So at the hearing officer level, probably not. These hearing officers are typically retired lawyers or semi-retired lawyers who hear a broad base of types of appeals, from parking citations to other kinds of code enforcement. So, and for numerous cities. So they get a broad base of experience, but there aren't a lot of cities doing odor enforcement in this way. So I suspect they don't get training on it, which would sort of be, at that point, the task of the code enforcement officer. They're defending the appeal to kind of lay the groundwork and help educate the hearing officer, or our job, if it was in court, to help educate the judge.
Really, this comes down to, does the evidence support the action? If we issued a citation, we need to have the evidence to back it up. So getting into some of the sections that perhaps are less of an interest to you, but really round out the presentation and the changes that are presented through this ordinance. A couple of bullet points here on cannabis taxes. So this ordinance would require that local cannabis taxes must be current for all licenses held by a licensee prior to renewing a cannabis license. As well, dispensaries must be operational for at least 1 month prior to the renewal of a dispensary license. And there was the elimination of a double penalty on delinquent cannabis tax payments, and an addition of code language authorizing tax payment arrangement agreements. All of those were directed by the Finance Department. So there's a slide in here on what's not in your draft ordinance, and this is just as important as what is in the draft ordinance. So our consultant has recommended a 1,000-foot buffer from residential areas, and I think in a case where we didn't have industry presence already in the community, this would be something that we would be advocating as staff. Staff is not recommending increasing the residential buffer from 300 feet to 1,000 feet from the standpoint that we have robust industry, that we have industry already here today, and this would create nonconformities. And the same with the separation requirement of 500 feet between licensed businesses. As I mentioned at the onset of our presentation, staff is recommending a balanced approach, and we believe the recommendation to remove cultivation from the PCC to add the separation requirement for resort residential in the same way as residential, that together with the odor control plan achieves our goal of mitigating cannabis odor and increasing accountability without going so far as to increase the number of nonconformities within the city.
You mentioned that eventually there would be discussion of the North City area, north of the 10, because these uses might be allowed up there, and currently there is no residential up there. Could this 1,000-foot buffer be put in place up there, since just we'd be starting from scratch?
So it's my thought that that would be a separate discussion as part of an amendment to the North City specific plan that was not considered as part of this ordinance.
Okay.
Because that was a separate ordinance directing an amendment specifically to the North City specific plan. So as we look at amendments to the North City specific plan, that may be an item of consideration, how we want to make changes or make modifications to the North City specific plan on cannabis uses.
Would the separation between two cannabis businesses, would that be measured from door to door, property line to property line? Or how would that be measured?
I don't know that we got to the point of measuring that, since it's not currently measured in the code. That could either be from property line to property line. That's the easiest measurement. Alternately, we could look at the measurement from the building itself, or where the cannabis business is operating within a multi-tenant building. We could look at that measurement, but we did not look at that further, as we're not recommending a separation requirement between businesses.
I can't speak for the attorneys, but I think that it would, well, I guess there's pluses and minuses from it being from the property line to property line or from being door to door. So I guess that's something you'll work out.
Yeah, and again, we're not recommending a separation requirement, so that's not in your ordinance, and therefore we did not work out the definition of what that would mean. We're not recommending it.
So wait, so then this slide,
This is what's not in the ordinance.
so there's not 1,000-foot buffer.
There is not a 1,000-foot buffer. There is a 300-foot buffer. We're not recommending 1,000 feet. The consultant recommended an increase from 300 feet to 1,000 feet. Staff does not recommend that because it would create additional nonconformities.
So there's no separation requirement between,
There is no separation requirement today. The consultant has recommended it. Staff is not recommending it from the standpoint that it would create nonconformities.
and if we wanted to add that in, where would we do that?
You could add that, and I think that's part of the deliberation with the Planning Commission tonight. You have the ability to make recommendations, even additions or modifications to the proposed ordinance that's before you this evening. So staff, to sum up this slide, these are some of the additional changes that you could make. There are many other changes or modifications you could make. These in particular, they were recommended by our consultant. They're in the report. Staff's concern here was that it would create nonconformities without contributing to our goal. Our goal is to mitigate cannabis odors, and we believe the elimination of cultivation in PCC, the addition of a 300-foot buffer from resort residential, and the requirement to provide or produce an odor control plan, that will address the core issue that we're having today.
So I think the way that the 300-foot buffer is expressed, doesn't that say from the building of the cultivator to the property line?
Yeah, give me a second here. So for schools, daycare centers, and youth centers, it's measured from the nearest property line of the parcel where that use is located. Setbacks from residential areas, those are different. That is measured to the nearest point of any legally permitted structure located in a residential zone, and there's some exceptions to that. So we've got it both ways. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
So there are other considerations, just to put a couple out there. So staff is recommending the elimination of cultivation in the PCC zoning district. You could also look at a cap on total canopy space instead, a limit of 10,000 square feet, for instance. That would still create nonconformities. There still would be businesses that are made in a nonconformity. But it would allow cultivation up to a small indoor cultivation license. It would also support cannabis micro businesses. There are more than one. There are multiple cultivation businesses today in the PCC zoning district. Those are identified in your packet. Those would become legal nonconforming uses, all of them. This change potentially would allow some of them to remain conforming uses. The last bullet point on here, this is not addressed in the ordinance either, but it is something else to consider. AB 1775 grants authority to jurisdictions that allow cannabis lounges to allow retail food and beverage sales and live entertainment, including the sale of ticketed events. We did not contemplate this as part of the ordinance. We're looking to address odor issues directly, but this is new legislation that could allow the city to permit lounges in a different way, and we wanted to be sure that we were sharing that information.
Does that include alcoholic beverages?
Yes. So in terms of public outreach and engagement, we have made concerted efforts to share and push this information out to the community. The SCS engineers report, a draft ordinance, and a summary memo were all published on the city's website in July. We also have an email distribution group of individuals that have submitted cannabis odor complaints to the city. It was pushed out to that email distribution group. We have shared this with the Coachella Valley Cannabis Alliance Network, CVCAN, and all email contacts associated with a local cannabis license. In your packet, you have the comments that we've received As a result of this outreach process, there was one additional comment submitted on Monday that was printed out and shared with all of you.
Did you get any feedback from the cannabis businesses? Since I think everything I saw in the packet was from residents.
Not so much, although I would say that we did meet with CVCAN, and the CVCAN, our discussion really centered around cannabis micro businesses and AB 1775. And then we had a cannabis task force meeting on Monday, and the cannabis task force that is comprised of residents along with industry representatives. And we did get a 5-1 recommendation from the cannabis task force to carry the ordinance forward to City Council. So closing out staff's presentation, and again, we have SCS engineers on standby for any technical questions you may have on odor science, odor control plans, anything along those lines, along with our legal counsel. Staff's recommendation is to adopt the resolution before you this evening recommending that the City Council approve an ordinance amending the Cathedral City Municipal Code, including the zoning ordinance, to amend the cannabis tax, licensing, permitting, and zoning, and enforcement regulations related to cannabis uses, and to amend various sections of the municipal code relating to administrative fines contained in titles 1, 3, 5, 8, 9, 11, and 14. And with that, I'll close out my presentation.
Thank you. Before you go, though, I'd like to check, first of all, that there are no further questions for staff, but also we haven't really involved the SCS representative. So I'd also like to check with people that they don't have questions for them. As a matter of fact, I do have one question for them. But let me check with everybody else first. Commissioner Bedard.
I'm good.
Okay. Malakoff?
Well, I'm not sure. I have a bunch of questions that I wrote out, and I'm not sure whether I should go through each one of them, or...
That's up to you.
I definitely have questions and some suggestions as to what I'd like to see.
So I think we could wait for the suggestions for our commission discussion, but if there are specific questions on the ordinance itself or the presentation from staff, then we should do those now.
Okay. Do you want me to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if I get into recommendations, you just cut me off?
Yes, I will.
Yeah,
I have my gavel.
Yes. If you look at section 1 to 5.88025, is there a limit on cultivation based on the volume of the product?
No.
There may be a minor cultivation at the back of a dispensary and major, like the one on Ramon Road.
No, it's not tied to product, although there are size limitations imposed by the DCC for the license type, but not volume of product.
So the cultivation is cultivation, whether it's one plant or 100.
For the state, the Department of Cannabis Control, it depends on the size of the cultivation site itself. So there are some thresholds, and I apologize, I don't have a table for those.
Oh, okay, so it's not the size of the plants or the number of plants, it's the size of the floor area?
Yes.
Okay. I understand that. So also in section 1, it says that the licensed professional engineer or a certified hygienist would be the one that would approve the control plan, but wouldn't the buck stop at the development services director?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
I'm looking at the definition of odor control plan, under section 1,
Yes.
it doesn't have any mention of the Development Services Director. Wouldn't the last place to approve an odor control plan be that person?
So odor control plan in section 1, that is a definition. And really what that is attempting to say is that that is a plan prepared by a licensed professional engineer or certified industrial hygienist. So the Development Services Director would not be developing or preparing that plan.
So it would be the,
It would be the applicant using a licensed professional engineer or a
Like-
certified industrial
like
hygienist.
that.
Yes,
Okay.
someone like them.
Then in section 2, authorization for the local licensing authority, wouldn't that come from the city manager and their designee? Or again, would that be from the appointed engineer?
So section 2, this is, well, it's distinct from section 1, but in this case, the proposal is to eliminate redundant language. There's no need to say "and community development director," as the local licensing authority means the city manager, which also means the city manager's designee. So that could mean any designee of the city manager acting as the local licensing authority
So it could be anybody designated
By the
on
city
city
manager.
staff?
by the city manager, yes.
By the city, okay. Section 3A, change of ownership. It says, the local licensing authority shall approve the change in ownership unless there's good cause to deny the change. That seemed a little vague to me. Shouldn't it be like good cause, such as felony conviction, fraud,
So
child endangerment?
in this case, good cause is already defined in the code, and the only change here is to add "or designee" to the chief of police. So there is a robust definition of good cause and what good cause means in the definition
So
section.
that's not a vague definition?
It is not.
Where do you find that definition?
I apologize, I don't have the full code
Okay,
printed,
get
but
back
that
to
is,
me on that?
it is in Title V. We can pull that up.
The what?
That is in Title V. It's currently in the licensing code, and we can pull that up,
Could
one of staff.
could somebody email that to me or something?
I think we can pull it up here in the meeting. If
Oh, okay.
We just have a moment.
Yeah, just give me a second and we'll pull it up. If you wanted to continue with your questions, I'll just interject.
Can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said that
We'll
we'll
get it.
pull it up, the definition for you?
Yeah.
Right now, yeah, and so if you continue with your questions, I'll kind of interject after.
Continuing with the good cause, what about bad actions from previous facilities in Cathedral City? So I guess that's part of what you're looking at.
Right, that's covered in the definition of good
Okay.
cause.
I actually have it if you're ready for it. So it says, for purposes of denying an initial local license, for suspending or revoking a local license, or for denying a local license, and it means one of 9 different characteristics that you could have. It ranges from knowingly making false statements, misrepresentations, material omissions, to criminal history of the applicant or the licensee, lack of good moral character, prohibited from holding a license under state law. So there's 9 different criteria. It could even be,
You
if
said
you're
criminal
operating.
history, then that could be an umbrella to just about anything in the
Correct.
penal code.
Correct.
Okay, I like that. Okay, good. What about on, did it include financial irregularities?
No.
So so fraud is in the penal code, but if you had financial irregularities in a previous application, that wouldn't be a reason to deny.
Well, usually the municipal code, judges and courts defer to our interpretation of that. So if that were to come up, we would look at how this code had been implemented in the past and also possibly consider how it should be implemented and how to proceed in the future. It might just be a call to our office where, Brandon kind of looks into, what we have to do to show that financially would mean good cause under our code, but we would just have to gather that evidence and we'll work with staff to kind of determine what the best recommendation moving forward is.
And could I
So
just
it's not-
interrupt just a second? So we're looking at amendments to the ordinance, but the ordinance itself is already approved. And the good clause, that ordinance has been approved previously.
Yes.
So this may be a case where there needs to be a further amendment at some point, but I'm not sure that bears on what we're discussing here today.
So on section O, under section 5, wouldn't we want to get the cell phone number also? Because it seems like the landline numbers are disappearing quickly. On all the city applications now, it says cell phone number rather than just a landline number.
Right. I think that's something that we can clarify in the implementation of the ordinance.
You answered that, you answered that. Vice Chair Mead asked that. You answered that earlier. So suggestions that we're not getting into, so I'll leave that off. And in section 11, what circumstances could include a cessation of operations? 11, under section B that's been crossed out.
A cessation of operations? I'm sorry, I'm not tracking you.
I guess that's a suggestion, so I'll have to come back to it. So this section 17, the size of the flower or the cannabis, it's meaningless. It's the area that it sits in, which we talked about. It's defining cannabis, but the size of the cannabis isn't the issue.
Right, so the prior discussion was whether there is a limit on the volume of plants or if there's some other control, and we discussed that the state licenses are directed based on the square footage of the cultivation operation. This is, in this section, we have a definition of cannabis, and there's some other definitions that are added. These are separate. There is a definition on cannabis cultivation space on page 13, I believe, that is also in section 17. So that-
Section 20, B, I ran into this with my HOA, but it wasn't my fault, just for the record. But I had an electronic check returned. Is that the same thing as an NSF if a regular check is returned?
So I think the intent with this change, this is existing language, and what is in bold, any additional banking fees or charges, that is to recover costs incurred by the city for an insufficient fund, yes.
So the electronic would be included? Okay. That's it. The rest of mine are suggestions when we get to that.
I think we'll get to those. Commissioner McPhail.
Okay. I guess sign of a good presentation is you answered a lot of my questions. But I still have one or two. But I wanted to really congratulate the staff on the thoroughness of the process you've gone through to produce this. I think it's a great piece of work, and the consultant's report was very understandable for a layperson like me, so congratulations all around on that. I do have one or two comments and questions and clarifications, which I've already alerted our planning director to, and I want to thank Mr. Rocha for very promptly getting back to me on some acreage questions, so you know where I'm headed. The report talks about where cultivation is allowed, and of course we're proposing in this ordinance to remove cultivation from PCC. And I guess I didn't realize until you made it clear in the presentation, because I was going to say, well, isn't cultivation also allowed in MUN and MUU? But that's North City, there's nothing there. So it's really only happening in PCC, and it's also allowed in CB2 and I1. So MU is not really part of this. So that changes the figures of the acreages I was thinking about. Because in reality, I was saying, oh, well, PCC accounts for 22% of where you can do cultivation, but that includes that MU, which is irrelevant, really. So PCC cultivation acreage is actually 46% of where they're allowed. So that's quite substantial. So we're talking about eliminating it from a zoning that accounts for 46% of where it's allowed. So this is a big step, and that's fine, but it is large. And what it did make me think about was, if we're removing cultivation from 46% of the land where it's allowed, doesn't that mean in the future, where it is still allowed to be in I1 and CBP2, future cultivation will become more concentrated, because we will only be able to do it on a smaller land area. And so that brought me to the thought of one of the consultant's recommendations, which we'll probably talk in potential amendments or discussion, and you can hit me over the head with the gavel at this point. If we're concentrating cultivation for the future in a couple of zonings and taking away a substantial area, should we maybe consider for the future for cultivation and maybe other types of cannabis use for new facilities some kind of spacing requirement, because they will only now be approved in less area than they are now. So that's just a comment question. I hope you got the gist of that.
Sure. So my initial response to that is, and I understand the analysis, I understand how you arrived at 46%. And when you look at the totality of the PCC zoning district across the city, it is vast. There is a lot of land that is zoned PCC, and I think you see that on the slide. It's really those areas in that sort of pink color. So there is a lot of PCC zone land. We also don't have a lot of cultivation today in the PCC zone district. I believe there are 5 today in the PCC zone district, and I apologize, this is really showing cultivation-only licenses, but you have 5 existing today. It's not prevalent, it's not common. Most of the cultivation uses are clustered around the Perez Road corridor because they prefer to be in that CBP2 or I1 zoning district based on the floor plate. Those are larger floor plate, they don't have as close proximity to sensitive uses, sensitive receptors, and they're more ideally suited for cultivation. Frankly, most existing commercial spaces are not designed for cultivation. It's not something that would be easy to convert to cultivation. So
Yeah.
I think the thought that we're going to see an over-concentration of cultivation in CBP2 and I1 because we're pushing it out of PCC, I'm not sure I would go so far as to say that. I think right now we don't have much in the PCC, and eliminating cultivation in the PCC really would prevent a perpetuation of the problem that we saw with C4 industry. We don't want to see that replicate. We don't want to see that use come into a similar commercial space in close proximity to sensitive receptors.
Although future cultivation will only be able to be in I1 and CBP2. So
Correct.
There's a potential if there was more cultivation. That's just my point. I guess you answered Chair Lee on this, and I've kind of forgotten the answer, about multiple non-conformities. And, you know, if this was to happen at the wave of a wand, we will have a number of businesses that are in some kind of non-conformity. And what does that practically mean for those businesses? We're not going to shut them down or anything, so what does it actually mean?
They can continue doing what they're doing today.
Yep.
They will need to comply with the odor control plan requirement, so they'll need to comply with new regulation, but that would limit their ability to expand. For instance, if there were a cultivator that had a 10,000 square foot building and they wished to expand by 5,000 square feet, if they were a legal non-conforming use, they could not do that. Right. But they could carry on, they could continue their operations as it were approved, as it stood today. They could also sell, transfer that license. There wouldn't be an issue there. If it is abandoned for 90 days or more, that's when the use would need to either discontinue or come into compliance with the code.
Right. It's sort of like a grandfathering in a way, a little bit of grandfathering.
It's the technical term for that,
yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, we'll talk about that I'm not going to get hit by the gavel, so I'll stop there. Let's see, what else do I have? Just a little, you mentioned in the report there was potential for complaints regarding cultivation uses in a multi-tenant building. I'm not sure, have we ever had a situation where there's been complaints in a multi-tenant business building?
I have not seen that here in this city, but I have in other cities, and this is not specific to cannabis, but I have seen odor issues between tenant spaces. And I think that is a reality. It's a possibility if it's not mitigated or controlled. And I think in a case where you're dealing with a high odor generating use, such as cultivation, that increases the possibility of conflict in a multi-tenant building.
In my HOA, there's legislation actually that covers this, not just for cannabis, but for cigarettes, that it's something to do with indoor clean air, that you can't, what you do inside your unit in a multiple family unit can't affect the unit above you or below you or beside you, where the air flows. And so I think we're on the right track with that, in that, you can't disturb or disrupt somebody else's airflow.
Just one last point. Appendix C talking about, this is for the consultant report, so it's maybe one or both of you can answer this. It's talking about public engagement and building relationships with communities. So I think you mentioned in the report, in your presentation, that SCS would be contracted to do engagement? Was I right
I think
about
that's
that?
meant to include their attendance at the Cannabis Task Force meeting, at the meeting tonight, and City Council. So we did contract with them to participate in these processes.
Okay. Because I was wondering what the outreach plan would be, and obviously it's no surprise, there's specific communities that we should obviously be making outreach about these regulations. They seem to know already, but I was wondering, we'd had meetings with specific communities, and also, are we going to be contacting businesses when this is passed to say, here are the new rules, and be prepared to follow them, and here's a timeline for you following them?
Yes, there will be outreach and communication. It's not our intent to catch anyone by surprise. We've attempted to share this, get this out as much as we can, including to residents and to businesses. And as we continue to move forward, as council takes action on this, we will be sharing information that gets into the implementation schedule, the phased implementation, what businesses should expect as they're getting into their license renewal in the upcoming year.
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair.
I will try to be quick. Just want you to clarify some things, both for us and for anybody who might be watching. So, if I'm an existing cannabis business right now, I'm not a new business, so I don't have to submit a odor control plan until I'm within the time of my permit and CUP renewal, correct?
Not CUP renewal, but the local
permit.
cannabis license renewal.
Okay,
that's
so
an annual renewal.
if this gets passed in 2 weeks and my license renews next week, I basically have a whole year where I do not have to put together a odor plan until or unless someone complains about odor. Is that correct?
Yes, this would commence January 1st, 2026, and the intent there is we're giving businesses enough time to anticipate and to react to this. Staff did not want to implement this starting November, December. We wanted to at least be able to communicate to businesses that there are new expectations while reserving the possibility that if there is an odor complaint and that we needed to accelerate that we could. So the phased implementation is intended to give as much advance notice as we can, and that is together with the requirement that if there is additional equipment needed per their odor control plan, that they would have 6 months or December 31st, 2026 to install that. That's to allow the businesses to anticipate capital expenditures and to be able to make the improvements that potentially could be required through an odor control plan.
Okay, so what about the businesses that are clearly not complying now and who are the genesis of this whole process? They're basically going to have, the people who are having problems with them now are going to have to suffer until January 1 and then another 30 days because it doesn't come into effect until January 1 and then they have
Not for
30
those
days?
businesses. So for that type of business where there is an odor issue, once the ordinance takes effect, if we have a cannabis odor issue with that business and they do not have an odor control plan, which they wouldn't until they're getting their license renewed, right? They would have 30 days to submit an odor control plan.
Okay, but I thought you said it won't take effect until January 1.
That's for existing businesses. That's the schedule to submit or require an odor control plan for them on that ordinary schedule. Now, for those businesses where we have an odor control complaint, they don't have an odor control plan, it would accelerate that where they would have 30 days to submit it independent of the requirement. That January 1st date, that's tied to the license renewal.
For new, okay, got it. Thank you. All right, that makes more sense. I noticed that in reading through what the other cities are doing, Palm Springs seems to have a pretty high citation amount, and so I wanted you to clarify what our citation amounts are going to be. And then the other thing is that Palm Springs seems to have a much stricter ability to just shut people down in saying that if the odor can't be mitigated within 7 days, the use must cease until effective odor control measures are in place. And I'm wondering, is that something you considered? And if you thought it was not a good idea, why?
Sure. So complex answer, and I'll give part of the answer, and I'll turn this over to our legal counsel to give the other part of the answer. So 1,000 and 5,000. Those are the fine amounts that we're looking at for the fine resolution. It would be 1,000 for the first tier, $5,000 for that second tier. And again, the first tier, that's where a business has an odor control plan. We're working with them cooperatively, giving them a written warning, giving them a chance to make corrective action or take corrective action before we do the reinspection. That's a $1,000 citation in that case. That second tier, where a business does not have an odor control plan, where they're failing to maintain it, failing to comply with it, that could lead to a $5,000 citation in that case. And then along with that, we have the potential for a finding of good cause for the revocation or suspension of a license or the denial of a license renewal. We did take a close look at the city of Palm Springs and their language. They are different than us, and I think that's important in a certain sense. They don't have a lot of cultivation. They did have one issue that they had to go through enforcement, and they did push a business out of the city of Palm Springs, but they have not had to use some of that language that's in the code because they don't have the same odor generating uses. They don't have a strong cultivation presence in their city. Much of what they have has also been pushed out into a green zone. So,
But they have lounges, and I have seen a lot of complaints online about the lounges, and even though we don't have lounges now, we may have lounges in the future. And so I'm just thinking, and I guess there's two ways of looking at it. They don't have the kind of uses that cause a problem, which is why they haven't had to issue the fines. I read it as they haven't had to issue the fines because people are following the rules because of the fines. And so I'm just concerned that we don't have enough teeth in here, that it's too much carrot and not enough stick. I know we're trying to be balanced, but when you had that timeline of all the things that have to happen before a citation is issued, and then it has to be 3 citations before they lose their license, that's a multi-week, if not multi-month cycle that has to go through. And meanwhile, people who are complaining are living with the nuisance odor. So I'm just wondering if we're, $5,000 is a big fine, not saying it's small. But if you're making millions of dollars a year growing cannabis, $5,000 may not be that much if you get fined that, you know what I'm saying? I'm just wondering
I do,
if-
and there are reasons that we opted for those fine amounts, and I think that's a good segue for our legal counsel.
Right, so the fines are something important, but they're only one lever you can pull. Another aspect that got talked about earlier was modifications to the plan. So, there's also the option to require resubmittal and make that plan more onerous. And I think the focus is really on corrective action.
Okay.
And the fines are there. You hope you never use them. And at the end of the day, what is really going to compel compliance is the threat of revocation of the license. And because like you said, fines theoretically can be paid, and if the activity is profitable, it can be a cost of doing business. But taking action against the license and potentially making that an illegal business, that's what is basically the biggest, you're talking about the carrot and the stick. That's the biggest stick that any city has in its arsenal. As for the fine amount, it's a contested issue in the law right now, the permissible amount of the fine. So there's a charter city argument that charter cities have greater leeway to impose higher fines. And there's actually a case pending with our office and with the city over the short-term rentals and the permissible amount of fines in that context. So we may get more clarity in the near future, but this is a safe fine amount, and as I'm sure you've seen, Palm Springs and other charter cities in the desert here have gone higher. So it is feasibly an option. One thing we did here, in addition to setting up this odor control plan framework, was also to clean up the administrative citation process. And so previously, I don't know if you saw, I don't know which section of the ordinance it is, but there was fine authorities scattered in like 40 different places in the code, and those are all consolidated now into one chapter, and the fine amounts are going to be set by resolution. So rather than having to do an ordinance with the first reading, the second reading, 30 days enforceable after that, by setting the fines by resolution, it'll be easier to adjust them. If they need to go up, that will be council's job.
What about the idea of terminating the use until there's compliance? I mean, I guess you can't stop growing, right? You'd have to remove all the plants.
I think that's
more
a
for like a
difficult, if
lounge or
not
something
an
like that.
unenforceable standard.
Okay.
I think what we've constructed is a solution that directs corrective action, that seeks corrective action and provides reasonable periods of time, either for a cannabis business with an approved odor control plan, open that up, look at it, determine what needs to change, what needs to be modified. There is language in here that directs amendments to an odor control plan as well. So it puts them on a track to take the action needed to reduce the odor at the property line where it's not detectable at the property line. That's second tier. It's 30 days to submit an odor control plan if you don't have an odor control plan, and that leads into citations immediately. So I think those periods of time were really intended to provide a reasonable period of time for a business to take the action that is directed in the code.
Okay. And just curious, I know you said that there really wasn't like a gold standard out there for this kind of thing as of yet. I may be wrong, but I feel like I remember just being aware that there are some cities that have odor control plans for fast food restaurants when it comes to grease smells and other types of businesses. Was that something that was looked at all?
So I am aware of one city here in the Coachella Valley that had an issue with grease and odor from that. Vastly different odors and vastly different sizes of business. So I'm not sure that it's
there's nothing to be
necessarily
learned
a
from
direct
this.
comparison.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I had one question for SCS. If you could find the slide where you are not going to adopt some of the suggestions from SCS. And so I just wanted to ask them, I don't know who our representative is. Oh, okay. So in the report, you have suggested certain distances. The question I had was simple. The answer may not be. How did you come to those distances? Was there empirical data that supported them? Were they just guesses on other ordinances you'd seen somewhere else? How did you come to those numbers that the staff here are feeling are not appropriate for our situation?
First of all, good evening, Chair Lee, Commissioners. So these are all observations that were...
Could you give us your name as well?
Oh, I'm Armando Hurtado. I'm part of SCS. I was part of the team that helped develop this report. These recommendations are based off of on-the-field experience. So we've done projects where we're working with greenhouses and we do gradient studies or basically creating a worst-case scenario where vents are closed. Early in the morning, there's an inversion layer where there's a heat cap keeping all the odors close to basically to the city level, and taking samples at multiple points, so 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet, up to 1,000. And what we found is 1,000 was roughly the point where we did multiple studies where we saw that there was no odor detected. So this was also worst case scenario. This wasn't with extensive filtration systems incorporated into the grows. So that's not to say that it's impossible. We also have worked with facilities that share fence lines with residents, with schools, and there is zero odor detected at the fence line. So our recommendation is just a recommendation based on capital input required to get to those levels. Obviously, the ones who share fence lines with the schools and residents had to make that capital intensive investment, not only for the procurement of the filtration systems, but also just the ongoing energy consumption. So it's a consideration, it's a recommendation. Andrew referenced it throughout the presentation, but every city is different. So while you would like to create this kind of perfect situation where you can have these buffers and can have 1,000 feet from the nearest residence, sometimes it's just kind of how the city is laid out, so.
So if I can summarize what you're telling me, I think you're saying there's no magic formula. We can't just put
Correct.
some numbers in and it spits out the exact distance we need. So you adapt that to the situation you are in that city.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And so this is something that's considered with the OAPs or the odor control plans. So the closer you are to a sensitive receptor, the more stringent the plans have to be.
Great. Thank you. That helps a lot. Yes, certainly.
I had one question for you. So looking through the systems and products that can be used for odor control, you've got this very nice how it works, pros and cons table here for all the possible things. And I understand that the city, it makes sense to me that we would be system agnostic and we would let people innovate and choose what works best for them. However, I was struck by the fact that almost every single one of these things has, to me, what seemed like pretty harmful side effects. Toxins being released into the air, dangerous exhaust gas, high temperatures, chemicals, things that can cause side effects if used around people, extremely caustic. All of these things have potentially pretty bad side effects. So my question is twofold. One, since we're not going to be telling people what to do and we're going to allow people to do essentially what they think is best, who is liable if one of these systems that they install is actually harmful to the general population or the people who live around it? Is it us because we required them to install a system, but we didn't confirm it wasn't harmful to the people who live around it? Are they liable if they release toxic chemicals into the atmosphere or something that's caustic, or they cause an explosion? One of these things said something about very high temperatures that can be explosive. That's one question. And then the second question is since we aren't going to require any separation between businesses that might have competing systems, how do we know that there's not going to be interaction between these systems? So one is releasing one gas, one is releasing another gas. I think of ammonia and bleach, right? You can't mix it together. So what is the oversight of, if we're being platform agnostic, what is the oversight of this stuff that they're putting in?
That's a great question. So what we provided was an exhaustive list of different technologies, but we have vetted a number of these technologies and we know for the most part what works and in what situations they work. So we wanted to provide the full scope. As far as things that are byproducts of these technologies, that might be a little out of my pay grade as far as who's liable for certain things.
Have you ever had situations where things have been worse than the odor? Because some of these things to me seem potentially worse than the odor.
Yeah, so that's stuff that's come with experience. So we have been able to see if certain machines that are using UV at certain wavelengths produce ozone, which can be harmful.
Right.
And we are aware of these things, and these are things that are pretty visible when we're doing the review of the plans, able to look at the specs of the machinery, just have that knowledge of whether or not this would be sufficient technology to cover certain things. And I mean, it's a great question, but we do have a more refined list of technologies that we recommend.
Okay.
So if I can interject just for a moment and perhaps provide a little bit of assistance answering this question. It's the business that is retaining a designer, either the engineer or the industrial hygienist that is preparing that design. And as with any other design that is submitted to the city, it's the responsibility of the designer that's proposing that system.
So the designer would be liable if something exploded?
They're responsible for the design. And this is no different than any other design that gets submitted to our building division for review. We review it for conformance to the code, but it is the responsibility of the designer to ensure that that's safe, that it conforms, complies with the code. So that liability, that responsibility lies with the designer that submitted the application.
I believe we're also either banning or discouraging certain types,
It's just the one, and I.
the phase, whatever it's called.
The
Yes.
vapor phase, yes.
Vapor phase,
testing
yeah.
systems. Another element here I think we're getting down into a technical level that perhaps we don't need to tonight, but some of the systems are financially infeasible and are not practical. I think they're identified in here to be exhaustive and to be complete in terms of the identification of the realm of possibility for these systems. The approach that we are recommending is performance-based and is meant to grant flexibility. In all likelihood, most cultivators are going to choose carbon scrubbers. They're going to choose one of the simpler solutions that are identified in the table and not some of those that you've identified.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions for staff or SCS? Great. In which case, I'll open the public hearing, public comments. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment?
I would like to note that we did receive a public comment. So we received written comment for this item from Scott McDonald. Copies have been made available to the commission, and written copies were available at the front entrance to chambers.
Okay, thank you. No other person present wishing to comment? Then I'll close public comments. Thank you. And before we move on, I'm looking at the time, and I think some members here might appreciate a 5-minute break.
Before we do that, so
Yes.
when do we get into the land use issues of talking about suggestions of different separations?
We're going to, so now that we've finished the public comment, we will now have a session in which we discuss our thoughts and any amendments that we want to see. Yep. And we'll do that after a 5-minute break.
Use your gavel.
No, it's just, I'm short, and if I go down further, then I'm gonna be like below the computer. Thank you so much. I'm so used to putting my feet on it, and I was like, oh, I lost this tool. That's so much better.
So these
Oh, very cool.
No, I just. The U.S. price is $3,000.
How much average energy produced?
Well, of course, you can't tell because it's wind.
Right.
They say up to about 13,000 kilowatts a year.
13,000.
So it's like 13 a month. I don't know what would that be.
Someone called like twice in a row. And I was like, it doesn't seem like it. I didn't leave a message, but once I heard the phone ring a second time, like immediately, I was like, oh shit, maybe it's like my husband and there's like an emergency, because normally someone's not going to immediately call you back. But it wasn't. Yeah, and no one ever leaves a message. This is the thing, and that's how you get. Although I got a phone from my work. Well, I took my old phone and I got a new number for it, and then I got a new phone for personal use. So I made the old phone basically a work phone, and that number apparently belonged to someone whose name was Blanca something or other, who was apparently looking for a job as a medical technician. So it's gotten better now. But for the first like 2 months, it was like 50 texts a day, 20 calls a day from recruiters. We're calling about, and I'm like, why is she not? And I kept thinking, like, okay, now it's been like 6 months. Like, why has she not updated her resume with like a new number? Unless it's just like her stuff on, like, I don't know, job sites or something. And she hasn't got it. But like, I kept getting calls from the same people, and eventually I would just answer and be like, this is no longer her number, can you update your records? And that seems to have helped over time, but I was like, oh my God, Blanca Camacho. And I even like put it on mine on like Nextdoor. I was like, if anybody knows Blanca, she must be local at 760, so I was like, if anyone knows Blanca Camacho, she is getting many, I know, but I was like, she's getting many calls for nurse technician jobs. People really like her resume, but she's not getting the, people are not getting in touch with her because she is not at this number.
You're doing well tonight. You don't seem to be doing well tonight. What do you mean? You feeling okay?
We've technically exceeded it.
Are you sick?
I'm making sense though, right?
Mostly. Which is about average for the course.
Oh, okay.
Seems like such a huge
I don't want to not make sense.
It's fine. We followed. No, you just look. You look
There's
a
only
little
like
peaky.
50 people. This was never like
Doing my best.
I get very tired these days.
That's
Roll
one of the
back.
reasons I couldn't go to the conference.
Oh, right. Okay, I'll call this session back to order. And now, having finished that part of this meeting, we need to proceed to a discussion amongst ourselves with three possible outcomes. We approve a clean adoption of the recommendation from staff, we amend that, or we reject. Simply for the purposes of discussion, I am going to propose a clean motion. If that's seconded, then we'll just proceed to discussion and with the potential to amend. So
My second.
I haven't done it yet.
Oh, I thought you did it.
But anyway, allow me. I move that we adopt the resolution detailed in the staff report dated August 20th, 2025, and entitled Planning Commission Resolution Number PC 2025-02. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And so we move to discussion of that motion. And there are a number of different things that I think were clearly coming up in the discussion. I think we will start probably with,
Would it be useful to divide it up and say the land use issues, discuss this first, and then
Yeah.
the municipal code issues?
that's fine with me. See, this is what discussion's all about. No,
Guide, we won't be bouncing back.
I was trying to list out the areas that people seem to be concerned about, and I was going to take those
Oh, there you go.
at a time. And I think the first issue I heard was related to the use of open space, such as the amphitheater.
Okay, I can, most of my issues, I don't have many comments on the administration that we went through, but for the land use, I do. So I think that there should be some more separations than what we currently have. So one of them, I believe that the amphitheater has kids that frequent it, and there'll be children's performances, and I think there should be a separation from that. In addition, I think that I disagree with not doing a separation from residential. I don't know that it should be 1,000 feet, but I think 500 would be suitable so that residences aren't bothered by these odors or the operations. I think that there should be a separation between the different businesses, at least 200 to 300 feet measured property to property. The next one I had was, we already mentioned child daycare, but I think adult daycare should be included. I think the proper name for that now is family daycare. Place of worship. I don't know how that got dropped out. It was in the original ordinance years and years and years ago, and it got dropped out. And I just don't think that those two uses belong together. And I felt really bad when we had Glory to God and we had the cultivation, whatever that place is.
It's a retail.
It's a dispensary, and I felt really bad, and I was like, kept on saying to them, I think I was the chair at the time, we can only go with what the code says, whether we agree with it or not. But I really think that there should be something in the code that separates places of worship, which would also include a Sunday school, which kids would frequent. So I don't know that we need to have a special definition for Sunday school, but place of worship would be all-inclusive.
Just out of curiosity, can you explain why a place of worship?
Why?
Yeah, why specifically?
Because I think a place of worship is where, regardless of what your particular faith is, that you should be free of that kind of use, which could be a nuisance to your ability to concentrate and pray and meditate and do what you do inside of a place of worship. So that's why I think that there should be a clear separation between the two. Plus, I also think it's where children go.
Okay. So let's stay with those points, and we'll see if we can.
I had two more.
Are they related to that point? Go ahead.
Well, I also think that there should be a distance requirement from social service agencies and parks, public, private, and that's everything.
Okay. Okay, well, debate on that question.
May I ask a point of clarification? Yes. So, to understand this goes to both of you. The ordinance is from property line to property line. If the buffer zone was 100 feet, if there was any kind of odor issue, it would be a problem, no matter how far the buffer is, correct? I mean, it is a zero,
Correct.
we're at pretty much a zero tolerance, no odor at all.
Right, so
So so the buffer zone is sort of secondary, if I'm understanding properly?
So the ordinance will require no order at the property line.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not looking for establishing a certain level of odor that's permitted.
Right.
So yes. if
So
there
whether
is-
it's 300 feet or 1,000 square feet, it's no order.
No,
So-
I think you're missing the point.
Okay.
It's also not just to do with odors, but it's also a chance to make sure that the land uses that are contiguous are good land uses to go together. So I think where children congregate isn't where these land uses should be. And I think that people should be free from not just the odors, but the activities that come from these places at a place of worship or at a public park. And I think it's more than just the odor.
So again, point of clarification, one of the big growing trends in places of worship is churches that are legal entities that do ayahuasca and mushrooms and other marijuana ceremonies and stuff like that. So I think you're speaking of a very traditional place of worship, maybe a Christian base, but
Well, no, I just asked the attorney about the establishment clause, and
cool.
you
Clarification.
want to go into that?
Right, so under state law, there's no special protection for cannabis religious uses, for example, or any other narcotic or illegal substance for that matter. So sometimes you see this issue come up with, cannabis churches trying to claim exemption from local licensing or local zoning regulations, and at the end of the day, those arguments don't prevail. There's an exception under federal law, under the Religious Reformation Act. I'm butchering that. I know it's known short as RFRA. And so you see that with things like ayahuasca for tribes, but not on the local level.
So let me just bring this back, because there's a lot of scope in this whole issue of just about various drug use and so on. But our issue tonight is the ordinance that addresses the licenses that the city issues for cannabis production or retail. That's what we're really looking at. So
We are looking at we are being asked to make changes to the
Taxes.
distance
Yes.
that as well. So I think he's bringing it up under that.
No, I just want to get into a discussion about whether religious orders can use cannabis or...
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so we're just looking at what affects the ordinance at this point.
Right.
I mean, I think it makes sense to say cannabis is a substance. It's a here in California a legal substance. It's really no different under the law here than alcohol. And there are already usually zoning laws that you can't have bars a certain number of feet from a school or a child care center. It seems to me that cannabis should be, especially when it comes to retail, should be basically the same as those things. I don't think, usually that's because you don't want children to develop a substance abuse problem or be exposed to substances that they're not able to buy. I think if you're going to expand that beyond children, then I think we're getting into a much bigger thing where you could make a claim that anybody shouldn't have to be exposed to something that they may not agree with. And so I think, to start adding on all these other business or use types doesn't really make sense. I think children is a very clear-cut thing. It's already in the law. We should just treat it the same way we treat it as alcohol.
And it can be considered a gateway drug. I know that might be a dated term, but I think that these uses would be legitimate to have as a normal distance requirement. And 9 times out of 10, if you look at other jurisdictions, they're going to have these. And we don't.
So let me bring in Commissioner McPhail.
I think I concur with Vice Chair Mead on that specific issue, because I think I think we should treat it like other industries, other uses such as alcohol. I think that's a pretty good example that the state has decided, the people have decided that cannabis is akin to things like that. And I don't think we should. I think we should treat it in a similar way. And I think if we added on the various things that we're talking about there, there's not going to be anywhere left for this business to locate in. I mean, that's not our intention, but if you don't want it near this and that and this and that, we're not going to be left with much. So I don't want to open the can of worms of this use versus that use being protected, so to speak. But I am interested in a general discussion about separation between cannabis businesses when we get to that.
And yes, and we'll move on to that. But let me just add my view on the list of other places. This is not really a new discussion, and it has come up in many discussions about ordinances for cannabis in the city. And the general feeling has been the view expressed by Vice Chair and Commissioner McPhail that the state already has set limits on certain things like schools, for example, and to expand that list out would make it very impractical in terms of enforcement, to actually find a place where a business which is otherwise legal could actually operate in the city. It would have to be not near Panorama Park and not near a school, not near a church, of which we have many, not near an adult center, not near the senior center. I'm running out of places where I could actually put a business. So I think it would be unwise for us to look to amend this ordinance in order to address that problem. It may be something that should be brought forward at another time to say there is a finding, we can create a finding that says that there is a reason to do that. But I don't think we're there at this point.
If we took out the adult daycare, and shouldn't we have children in mind?
Yeah, but children could be everywhere. They can be at a grocery store. They can be at the bank with their parents. I mean, children go everywhere that adults do. So we can't say any place a child might be. You can't have the whole idea is that it's a potentially luring them in to, not luring them in, but somehow making them think that they should do drugs, right? But they're not doing that if the kid's in a grocery store. I don't know.
And that thinking isn't, as somebody who works in the rehab industry, that thinking isn't modern thinking.
Right.
So you're not thinking that any of these uses could be ones that should have separation between cannabis uses or from a place of worship, or separation between the businesses?
Separation between the businesses, I think, is a different conversation. Right. I think we're all talking about the first part, which is just if it's a place where primarily adults go, like if it's an adult daycare, what is the problem with there being a cannabis dispensary nearby? There's no negative impact from that dispensary.
Right.
Or a house of worship. I don't understand why that would be any different. Because there's no negative impact. If we're saying this, it's not the odor, what is the negative impact?
Well, I think the negative impact is that's why whenever you have one of these uses that come in that's going to be by a place of worship, you get the place of worship that objects because of the people that are going to be there, the odors, the activities, possible crime. I think that it would be our responsibility to ensure that the land uses are compatible.
I don't think any evidence bears that out in our city. We've been doing this for a number of years now, and actually crime rates are not really related to the dispensaries or retail businesses. And
I think that so there's no support for any of these uses that endanger children
The only one I might support would be if you wanted to say outdoor recreational spaces that had athletic fields or something like that, which maybe would include the amphitheater, maybe parks like Panorama or Century. Typically, those parks are in residential areas, so they're unlikely to be near that kind of a use to near a commercial area where this kind of business would go in anyway, I think you could make the case that those places are predominantly for children, but even that I think is a bit of a stretch.
And I think at this point in this discussion, we could not create a finding that says that we've heard evidence there is a negative impact on those
We
children.
don't need a finding.
Well-
We need to be able to,
We need to be able to justify why we're making an amendment. So if we want to make an amendment, we need some objective evidence that says, yes, children would be harmed if we didn't do this.
no, I remember many places of worship coming in, when they had these places coming in next to them and being very upset.
I understand that, and it is an issue, and there may be a case to look at a future amendment to the ordinance that says, there's a disallowed list of places, but I don't think that relates to the ordinance that we're considering tonight.
Well, I don't see this going anywhere then. A little surprised.
Okay.
We could move on to your other issue, though, which is the separation.
Yes, let's,
Which I think you
if
might
you're good
want
with
to
that.
comment
The separation between uses.
Okay.
on. Yeah, the separation between individual businesses.
Locations.
Yeah, the separation
Yes.
between locations.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that becomes a difficult issue too, just because we don't have many places and these businesses already exist. So take Perez and Cathedral Canyon. There's two dispensaries right around the corner from each other. One of those dispensaries would have to be declared illegal and moved.
Non-conforming until
Well, they would both have to be. You can't say one is non-conforming and the other one isn't.
Or do you do some grandfathering? Like if you exist now, you stay.
Well-
Future businesses that come in must obey X hundred.
That's one of our only, we have as a city very few industrial commercial areas, and we're already removing it, which I agree with the PCC, but to remove it out of an industrial area that is an industrial area, I don't understand the reasoning why we need separation.
No, if we're talking about dispensaries.
That's
yeah,
what I'm saying. As far
dispensaries.
as a business that is a cannabis business and another cannabis business in an area that is made for industrial type of work, which would be our I-9 or whatever they are, I don't understand why we would want to necessarily have that separation. That area is made for that. If it was a box company, would we want to say, oh, well, one box company can't be next to the other box company?
What about in the commercial areas? So like on
Easy,
Ramon,
yeah.
next to the bowling alley, there's a dispensary that also has a lounge.
That's a
Should point out, They
PCC.
do have a new
That's-
lounge in that place now.
That's a PCC, isn't it?
Was a lounge, yeah.
Dispensaries are allowed and lounges are allowed in PCC.
Right.
Right,
and
because
they-
they're low.
And there's a lab testing facility in the same
Right,
building.
by the bowling alley.
Right, so I'm just saying, if the question is, should we force all cannabis businesses to have some separation between them? Are we only saying cultivation, or are we saying all cannabis businesses? We should be.
It should
I'm
be
not
the
sure
ones
what
that,
the proposal is.
the,
There used to be an arts district where there were a lot of resale shops and restaurants, and now they're all gone. They all went to other cities, and now it's just cannabis. And
automotive,
I
It's a
think
lot of
that's,
automotive.
a lot of automotive, right?
but still,
And
it's
adult.
a majority cannabis, and a lot of the larger tile businesses and home decoration businesses left the city because of this. And I think that's why we should have a separation.
Are you
An
saying a
argument.
separation of specific types of cannabis business, or are you saying all cannabis business?
I think if we held it to the notion of odor, which is the issue, the idea that the closer certain cannabis businesses are together, that must produce more odor, and it would be less of an impact if they were further apart.
I think that's the crux of what we're trying to discuss today. And this slide that we have up on the screen is instructive in that, because there were larger distances suggested by SCS, but we just heard that there's no empirical data for those distances. So
And Danny, may I also say that that 1,000 feet was without, correct me if you will, the 1,000 feet that was suggested that was not adapted was also without any other odor mitigation. Correct? Yes. So that 1,000 feet on its own, without any kind of rectification of fixing the problem, but we are requiring quite a lot of solutions to fix the problem, regardless, I mean, in a very real way, regardless of the space.
It's more than, I mean, our ordinance is to fix the odor issue, but it's also to fix any other kind of land use issue that we have.
I didn't understand it as a land
I'm
use.
not sure that was ever the intention, because the reason
To do that, isn't it?
well, the reason the city put this whole process in motion was because of the serious complaints, and there are serious complaints of odor issues in the city. Now, I said it before, but I'll repeat. Adopting this amendment, which fixes that specific problem, which the city council asked us to address by suspending the business licenses, that doesn't preclude the city coming back and considering other issues which may be more appropriate.
What is tonight supposed to be just about odor and not about cannabis in general?
I think that's
I was asking staff.
That's essentially the case here, because the ordinance we're looking at, or the parts of the ordinances that we're looking at, specifically address just that part. Did you want to comment, Director?
You have a multi-tiered response, and yes, this is to address cannabis odor, and there were other issues included within the ordinance that were related to this. Everything that is recommended is related to the odor issue. Now, if there are other mechanical issues with the code, this is an opportunity to address those, and you see that in some of the other sections within licensing, within the cannabis tax, the admin fines. We have taken an opportunity to clean up other items. So if there are items that the Planning Commission wishes to include, I think this discussion on the separation requirements is relevant. This is an opportunity to address that. And if there are additional buffers that you would like to see, this is an opportunity to do that. I think here, though, we're looking for consensus from the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the City Council. So I think this is a good discussion, and if there is consensus on some particular recommendations, we will carry that forward to City Council.
Could we, if we didn't address any of these issues tonight, could we address them through the steering committee?
Those that are under Title IX, yes. That are related to land use, yes. I think if this is reasonably related to the presentation of the discussion, I think that tonight is a good opportunity to advance those recommendations where there is consensus with the council, with the Planning Commission. So I think if it's related to the discussion, this is your...
Aren't the location issues I'm talking about all under Title IX?
Yes.
So then theoretically, if nothing happened tonight with this, we could address it through the zoning.
It's another opportunity. I would say this is a great opportunity in the sense that we're talking about cannabis in general, and it's an opportunity for the commission to develop consensus and to provide direction to City Council on cannabis. The zoning ordinance update, yes, that's another avenue. That is a much broader discussion, and I think this opportunity, this discussion tonight is a focused opportunity on cannabis.
My concern is that I feel like this agenda item is before us because a lot of people have been negatively affected by the odor. And and they have been waiting almost a year for the city to respond and implement something. So I want to make sure that we don't potentially derail doing something about that urgent issue tonight in order to open up talking about other things that could be addressed right now. If we can address other things as part of this, great, but I just don't want to see us say, oh, it's 11 o'clock, we're going to have to punt this to another meeting and leave without taking action on the core issue.
I agree with you. I just think that we have the opportunity to protect children and protect people that don't want to be bothered by this. And I think that's just as important.
I agree with you on protecting children, and I think the ordinance already does that, and we could easily add some additional language to it. I am concerned about what I'm perceiving, and I could be wrong, so correct me, but what I'm perceiving to be a moral concern about cannabis businesses versus a evidence-based concern. So I think if there was evidence, if we had the CCPD here saying we have an increase in crime around dispensaries, or there's been robberies near cultivation places, and we have an actual factual concern that those businesses bring negative elements to surrounding organizations and businesses, that's one thing. We don't have any of that evidence in front of us. Nothing indicates that. And so I'm just concerned that we're essentially disparaging these businesses by saying that it's negative for them just inherently to be near a house of worship or an adult daycare or any other kind of business. It seems like there's a moral judgment happening there.
And I think there's been
I just want to interject at this point, and I think this is a good point. We have received a lot of complaints. Those complaints, though, are coming from residential areas. We have not received complaints since I've been here, notwithstanding the one public hearing on a particular land use case. We've not received complaints from places of worship, from anyone using a park about the proximity of that place of worship, that park, to a cannabis use. The complaints that we received, the cannabis odor complaints, those are coming from residential areas. Vice Chair Mead is correct. These are serious issues. These are serious complaints. Those have come from residential areas. We're not receiving those from other businesses. We're not receiving those from other places within our business and industrial parks. They're coming from residential areas.
And I think there hasn't been evidence that I can remember being presented by the police on any criminal activity or any unusual criminal activity associated with particularly the retail spaces. It's unlikely that there would be any related to the cultivation spaces. So I don't think there is an increase in crime. I think that the children are already covered to the extent that the state has already considered that. So again, I'm agreeing with Vice Chair. I don't really see an overwhelming case here to deal with that at this point. Just checking my list of the issues that were raised. Vice Chair had an issue to do with 7-day suspension of licenses or the work at the facility, I think.
Well, so I guess my concern is even though we don't have any current uses where the use could be shut down in the meantime, we could in the future, like the lounge that does exist and like future lounges. So it seems to me that we should be not just thinking about the uses we have now, but the uses that we could have in the future. And we may want to have something in there that does allow the city to say, you're operating a lounge, the odor is going on too much, you have to close and you can't have people smoking in your lounge until the odor is resolved.
Okay. Thoughts on that? Commissioner McPhail?
Could you just go over that one more time?
Yeah, so it'd be more like what Palm Springs has. So Palm Springs has something in their ordinance, which I've lost now, 'cause I had it, that basically said that, if they got a complaint, they gave them a certain, I think it was 7 days to correct, and they hadn't corrected in 7 days, that they needed to cease the use that was causing the odor until the odor situation was rectified. So that wouldn't be practical, let's say, for cultivation, but it could be practical for manufacturing, it could be practical for distribution, and it could be practical for a lounge. Pretty much cultivation is the only thing it couldn't. And so I'm just thinking to the future, if we do end up with a bunch of lounges, that might be something we want to have as a tool.
Vice Chair Mead, if I may just kind of chime in really quick. So I know that part of the issue that is a red flag for me personally is the idea that you do have to provide due process when certain licenses, permits are issued, right? So I know you were talking about, that first citation, that second citation, the third citation, that's all like due process and an opportunity to correct. I know that Palm Springs and other, municipalities might take a harsher view on that, but really, our recommendation with going forward is consistent with at least the case law. And, when you think about suspension of a CUP or suspension of a license, they have to have an opportunity to be heard before you just say you're shut down. Even if it's for only 7 days, they have vested rights that are included with issuance of that permit, with issuance of that license.
So if a bar was serving children,
So that's criminal at that point. So it's different. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So at that point, you're talking penal code. The police can absolutely come in, and there's just different ways to address something like that. And, I'm just talking about in terms of, just that general idea that Palm Springs is going to say, hey, yeah, your odor is out of control. Like, you have 7 days as of like right now. You have a week to fix it. Or we're shutting you down completely. The argument can be made that you're interfering with that business and those vested rights that were asserted to that business when they issued that license, when they issued that CUP.
So there'd have to
it's
be-
just a little bit of litigation that we worry about, but it is something that, maybe we can keep an eye on as far as consideration in the future, because you do want every ordinance, you do want it to be effective, right? You do want to be able to have remedies available to you when people do not follow what is in our municipal code.
I've expressed in other meetings that I prefer the word shall quite often to may. I don't like may very much because it's too vague. But if we were to do anything with this, may might be the right word to say that the department may order a 7-day cessation of business.
Use the word may, the difference between shall and may is optional, shall.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, and I don't know if you,
Don't you want it to be mandatory?
I mean, I don't know if they took this, if this is just the writing of the person who pulled this information together from our staff, or if this is what their code actually says. But it says if the odor cannot be mitigated within 7 days, the use must cease until effective odor control measures are in place. That's after they have been given first given a written warning and then given 7 days to modify their odor control plan to mitigate odor issues. I'm not saying we should necessarily do this. It just seems to me like they have a little bit more teeth, yeah. And it just seems like this issue's been going on for so long. And to be honest, when I read this ordinance overall, I was a little underwhelmed. I felt like for the severity of the problem, the time this has been going on, the number of people who have complained, I felt like a little let down. Like I didn't think it was strong enough. And so what I'm just trying to get to is if I'm a member of the public and I'm one of those people who's submitted one of those 900 complaints that you guys have received, and I've been on that email list and I read the public comment that was submitted, am I going to feel that this is strong enough? And so I'm just looking for ways to try on the public behalf to make this a little bit stronger.
So I wonder if I guess we don't have any statistics as to whether or not Palm Springs has ever successfully used that. And it sounds like from legal advice that if Palm Springs did try to do that, then that operator would have a right of appeal, which would suspend that notice. Yeah, is that correct?
Yeah, I can speak that. So, yes, I haven't seen their ordinance, but typically when you have local regulatory licenses like cannabis licenses or massage permits, those sorts of things, when there's a provision for immediate suspension and you have to stop operations right away, the way you provide due process is providing a subsequent, you can appeal it, you get a subsequent hearing on whether or not that suspension was appropriate. And as part of that process, as soon as you file the appeal, the suspension is stayed. So essentially,
Right.
you can.
So essentially, nothing would actually change during the period of the appeal or yeah.
So you can
pending
accomplish
appeal,
that
basically.
policy goal of providing for an immediate suspension, but if they appeal, then it's put on hold.
So I think I have sympathy for the concept.
Yeah, okay.
But-
So you've explained it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I may, we can always, add this as part of the staff report if there's just, consensus as far as maybe investigating something that we can do and like what liabilities might be associated with that, because, we can make a recommendation as far as your legal, right? But if city council does see this as important enough to say, hey, yeah, we are willing to take that risk, that's up to them, right?
Well, the other example I'm thinking of would be like restaurants when they get citations for cockroaches or rodents or whatever, right? Sometimes it's just a warning and they can continue on and then they get re-inspected. Sometimes they're actually shut down. That's not criminal. It's still right?
No, but it's health and safety code, so it's still state law.
Okay.
So yeah, there are just certain thresholds, but no, and I understand what you're saying because you would think that the businesses, as we're treating cannabis similar to like alcohol or any other business, you would think that those kind of thresholds would probably exist by now with odor. So I think that that's what we're trying to do. But if it is, like I said, if I get a majority of the commission to kind of indicate, hey, part of this is we would like to see something maybe a little more immediate as a remedy for the city to consider, like we can include that information for city council, and then we can look into maybe the liabilities associated with the different options, including maybe something, because I'm sure that they have seen the Palm Springs ordinance as well, and they might have the same question and concern that you do. So.
Thank you. So, so far we've discussed the land use issues, including schools and religion, the separation, distancing.
Did we put that to bed? Separation.
I think we did, but if there is more discussion, then let's go down to that.
I wasn't quite sure where we said, okay, we're not going to consider that, and if we are that are not, that's fine. But I do think, given that the SCS engineers report itself recommended separation, and this is all in the lens of odor control, it seems to make sense, at least for, and I don't know whether this causes all sorts of complications, the issue of future businesses, not affecting current ones who will be non-conforming / grandfathered in, but if a new, and maybe they also have in their table, and I don't know how scientific this is, that I think it was like cultivation is like a very high odor risk, and manufacturing was high, and I can't remember what all the different categories were. If we accept those categorizations, we could say if you are moderate to high odor, then one of these distancing kicks in for a new business.
But Roy, I kind of take exception that it's just about odor, because it's not. It's about the cannabis ordinance and how it should be reflected in Cathedral City. And I think that odor and what the people at resorts have been going through is horrendous. And I agree with our vice chair that we need to take care of that. But I also think that it's other things that need to be addressed also. So you can't just say this is about odors.
Well, I'm basing my question or my idea in this report, which was focused on odor, as an issue, as a finding for us to address, that the engineers report addressed as well.
So as a point of clarification, again, the same idea, but that 500 feet between licensed businesses to you guys, was that without any odor mitigation, no scrubbers, no nothing? That was
essentially creating a worst case. So with the implementation.
I'm sorry, could you come up and speak to the mic, just if anybody is online too?
So in that study, it was creating that worst case scenario. So with the implementation, with the air filtration systems installed, it is very possible to be closer in proximity to these residents. However, that would require air filtration systems up to a certain standard.
So
Okay.
to be clear, the 500 feet was without mitigation. Okay.
So, yeah, so if these systems were in place, we might not be recommending a
We may not need
Correct.
500 feet.
Right. And we'll
Okay,
have
thank
each licensee has to have a mitigation plan.
I can live with that.
So, yeah. Okay, were there any other items that I haven't mentioned that anybody needed to discuss? Would it be the vice chair?
Yes, so on one of the slides where you talked about other things that we could consider, one of them was potentially limiting the maximum size of a cultivation facility. And what struck me was in your presentation when you said that you looked around the state for other ones and you could not find any that were of the size of ours that were indoor, that were built for, purpose-built, right? Which made me immediately write down, maybe it's too big. And maybe we should look at limiting it. And then you said, maybe we should look at limiting it. So I think you had said we could look at something like 10,000 square feet, which would still encompass the micro businesses, but would maybe not have as big of a problem with, wouldn't be as big of an expense for them, wouldn't be as big of a deal for them to limit odor. Is that what you were getting at?
So, yes, in our survey of other cities and counties, there are some that limit the size of cultivation. We did see that. We don't have a maximum limit on cultivation size. I think what we have right now, we have cultivation in our PCC zoning district, our commercial zoning district. We didn't see that really anywhere else either. But the suggestion in the staff report was that in lieu of removing cultivation as a conditional use in the PCC zone district altogether, right now you've got 5 cultivation businesses in the PCC zoning district, including the large indoor cultivation use near Date Palm Drive and Ramon Road. So in lieu of removing that altogether, you could look at putting a cap on cultivation within the PCC zoning district itself. So a cap of 10,000 square feet of total canopy space, for instance, that would still allow those cannabis micro businesses. It would still allow the small indoor cultivation licenses and those that are below that threshold to operate through a conditional use in the PCC zoning district. So that is an alternative to striking cultivation as a conditional use in the PCC zone district itself.
Strike it out.
What about just limiting it, period? Anywhere?
I'm sorry.
What about just limiting the size in any zoning?
That's a possibility.
Okay, because I didn't realize you were suggesting in lieu of
Yes,
removing
that
it.
was
Okay.
suggested as an alternative, recognizing that we do have other cultivation businesses in the PCC zone district. They haven't gotten a lot of attention. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about them, but there are 4 others other than the one that we're all abundantly aware of. There are others that have been operating without complaints, without issue, and as well, there is a thought that cannabis micro businesses, for instance, the small indoor cultivation businesses, perhaps there is an argument to support those and the continuation of those in the PCC zoning
Got
district.
it.
So we put that out as an alternative.
So I would suggest that I don't really like the idea of making smaller facilities available in PCC. So I think we should keep that.
Yes, I
Yeah.
wasn't suggesting replacing it.
Right. But I think, if I understand it correctly, we're also not equipped or at this point capable of putting forward an amendment that says the limit shall be 15,000 square feet or whatever. We don't have any real information to base
Data.
that on. So what we might do, though, is to have an item in the staff report going to council saying that we recommend that the department look at establishing an upper limit for the size of a cultivation center. Would that work?
If we don't include it in the motion, I don't think it'll go anywhere. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it, but Commissioner McPhail wanted a note about stop signs.
Yeah, I would like something more concrete from recent experience. I would agree with that.
Based on that experience,
Yep.
that didn't go anywhere.
Right.
Yep.
I would think that if you want an upper limit, it needs to be more specific so that it doesn't get lost the way the stop sign did.
So I can see that point. Yeah, I mean, we know that things haven't necessarily gone to council after we've talked about them, they have not appeared in the staff report. So, I'm not sure how we move forward to an exact
Presented it
number.
as an option, as an alternative, which means some analysis was done by staff, correct? Even if we were considering it as a separate amendment, you did some analysis on that. You came up with that number some way.
10,000 square feet, yes.
Yes.
It was based on the Department of Cannabis Control licenses, and that actually is a suggestion for the commission. I mentioned the large indoor cultivation license, that there's only 7 of those across the state. You've got 5 in Oakland, 1 in Richmond, and ours here. That's 22,000 square feet.
Do you have any idea what the average size of those cultivation centers are? I mean, I know the limits, and it goes up to 22,000 feet.
In our research of other cities, those that capped cultivation, 22,000 square feet. They limited large indoor cultivation. So they allowed cultivation for any license type up to the large indoor cultivation, and they capped it so that a large indoor cultivation license could not be supported. So that's a number, at least large indoor cultivation, that's 22,000 square feet as defined by the DCC.
So that could be a sensible compromise, I think, to go with the state licensing, to say that we would take that size and nothing bigger in future applications.
So what you're saying is that the upper limit would be 100,000 square feet?
10,000.
No. Can you remind us of the different sizes?
If I understand the discussion with the commission now, the thought is, the staff recommendation was eliminating it from the PCC, but the thought may be, do we want to put a maximum limit on cultivation size in all zone districts, not just PCC, but in all zone districts?
Right.
Is that correct? I thought we were still on board with eliminating it from the PCC.
Oh, we are.
Yeah, so eliminating it from the
From
PCC.
PCC, and I understand the discussion is that there also may be a desire to limit the size of a cultivation license. And what I am suggesting perhaps is that you tie this to the DCC license types and
Yep.
the large indoor cultivation license type, that's 22,000 square feet or more. Other cities that have limited cultivation have chosen to limit it consistent with the DCC definitions. So 22,000 square feet, that would allow anything less than that, and it would preclude any future large indoor cultivation licenses.
The C4 one, though, how big is that?
It's
Much larger, that's
200.
200,000
Okay,
square feet.
got it.
cultivation.
Just wanted to make sure, because that's what prompted me to say, okay.
Right. So I'd be willing to entertain an amendment to say that we want in all no production in PCC as stated, but then to tie the upper limit for a commercial grow facility to what was the precise license?
Large.
It was 22, but
22,000 square feet.
Oh, I was going to use I was thinking we'd use the state language,
Large indoor cultivation.
large indoor cultivation, as defined by the state.
So you would not want to permit that, but anything less than that, and I apologize, I don't have the DCC regulations up at the moment, but
I think that literally is the name, large indoor cultivation, no more than 22,000. It's kind of a mouthful, but you see these license types, like small indoor cultivation, no more than 5,000. That's just what they call it.
I mean, would it make more sense to just say that we're tying it to the state's current definition of that? Because if that changes, then ours would adjust with it, and we wouldn't have to split a difference if they raised it to 25 or something like that?
Yeah, and you can typically accomplish that just by putting comma as may be amended from time to time, and we can maybe try to pin down a particular regulation in state.
Okay, yeah, because I was just thinking we could just say no larger than the state's defined large indoor cultivation.
I think that's a good plan.
So if I wanted to make that as an amendment, I don't know where that goes, since that's a
We have-
Gets
we have-
thrown in the code somewhere.
You don't need to do that, I don't think. So you need to say what we want them to do,
Okay,
and then you need to find out where it goes. So I would, so you would propose an amendment, and that would become added to my motion, and that would be a substantive
okay.
motion.
So does everyone understand what the amendment is?
Yes.
That we're voting on, which is to limit the upper limit or the maximum size to correspond with the state's definition of a large indoor cultivation facility in the zones where we're going to allow cultivation, according to the new municipal code.
That's
Okay.
sufficient?
I would love to second that.
There you go. So that's moved and second.
Her amendment.
Yeah, he's seconding my amendment.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay.
So we need to have a formal vote.
So are there any other areas of discussion?
Do we need to vote on that, or do we come back to it?
Well, I'll come back to both of them. So, no other. So let's
Oh,
move.
I had one more quick thing, and
Uh-oh.
there may not be any appetite for it, but I thought that in light of the public engagement requirement that we put in for large development projects as part of the new notification, would there be any interest in potentially requiring a public meeting for, let's say, these kind of large cultivation facilities that were coming up for, that had put in an application to meet with the public, to maybe do some scientific education about what they're going to do, what their plans are, make, well, I know most of the complaints we've gotten have been from communities, residential communities. They at least give them an opportunity to, let's say, meet the HOA board, open a line of communication if there are any issues. It's just a thought. I'm not going to die on a hill for it.
Is that currently part of the application process?
Good evening, Commissioners. No, the public notification regulations that were put in place was based upon project site size. So if it was 5 acres or greater, or 10 acres or greater, it triggered certain requirements. And offhand, I don't recall what that trigger was for the community notification, but it wasn't based upon size of facility.
Correct. I'm saying, similarly, would we be interested in doing something like that, since these larger cultivation facilities seem like they have the potential to cause the perception of there being problems or actual problems? I'm saying, is there any appetite to do something like that?
I guess that would be a question for the commission. The state identifies 22,000 square feet as a large indoor cultivation. I don't have a list of, other than the one on Ramon and Date Palm being, larger than we understand that's a problem. I don't know what that threshold is for the other ones. Like, are they, again, as indicated by Director, the other cannabis cultivation facilities haven't been creating or haven't had these odor issues. And so that may be potentially burdensome. I don't know. That's going to be up to a discussion with the commission.
And again, I was just throwing it out.
How many of those facilities would we actually have? And that would probably be in our other, I believe we call it the MU area, that is not being considered right now. So on the north side of town. I think that could be a good amendment, but I don't know if there's a place for that to even be considered in where we are as a city.
Right.
Okay.
But I think it could be great. I mean, it might be an amendment just to add that if in the future, if there is another 22,000 extra large indoor cultivation being proposed, that they must do a notification process.
Why not just bring it up in the zoning study group?
Yeah.
I can do that.
All right.
Okay. If there are no other comments at this point, then we'll move to a vote for including the amendment, which was...
And who seconded? Somebody, I didn't hear who did it. No, I thought I heard somebody say it would already been.
That was the main motion.
Oh.
It was already seconded.
Thank you.
Do we vote on the main motion and then the amendment, or how does that work?
No, we vote on the amendment.
Okay.
We see if the amendment is joined to the main motion to make a substantive motion, and then we vote on the substantive motion. So So what we're voting on here is the inclusion of the amendment.
You're voting on the inclusion of the amendment. So we had a motion made and seconded originally for discussion, and then a substantive amendment made to that. And so we're voting on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the actual original motion.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
All right, so the way I have this down is that for the substantive amendment, that a motion was made by Vice Chair Mead and seconded by Member Commissioner Bedard. Is that correct? All right, so I will go ahead and open that vote. Please go ahead and vote. All right. Let the record show that a motion was made by Member Vice Chair Mead, seconded by Member Bedard. The motion score vote in favor was 4 with 1 nay. Motion passes. And then to move on to the original amendment, let me get that pulled up for you.
So we're done with all discussion now.
Yes.
And again, that motion was made by Chairman Lee
I think I seconded it.
and seconded by, by Member McPhail. Go ahead and vote, please.
Wait, what?
Nothing coming up.
Is this for the report?
This is for the main motion. To adopt the so I'm not getting anything, but I would be aye.
Oh, okay, let me mark
That's
it
weird.
down.
Yeah, I
All
don't know.
right, so I'll do a recording of this. So I have a motion made by Chairman Lee, a second made by Commissioner McPhail, and then I have Bedard, Mead, McPhail, and Lee voting in favor, Member Malakoff voting opposed. All right, I am going to close that vote. So the the motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. We have item 3 on our agenda, non-public hearing items. 3A is a development code update. Do we have a staff report?
I have an update for you this evening. Good evening. So as promised, we would do these brief development code updates. So today, the TAG, the Technical Advisory Group, which is made up of staff, received administrative provisions. These administrative provisions were comprised of 2 sections that will be implemented into the updated development code update. That includes the code administration section and the permit procedures sections. So staff TAG, the Technical Advisory Group, has been tasked with doing a review of these. So we've got about 2 weeks to get these turned around, sent back to Mintier Harnish for review and revisions so that it can then be sent on to the steering committee, because the steering committee then meets on September 9th. That September 9th steering committee meeting will be held virtually. It's been scheduled for that evening. Once that steering committee has taken place, the comments and feedback that we hear from steering committee will then go back to Mintier Harnish, and they will prep that then to turn around and give to this body, the Planning Commission, at your special meeting, which will be held on October 15th. So that meeting will be to discuss that. You will also have subsequent special meetings, December 17th, and that one will be to discuss zoning district provisions. And that will then pave the way for, and some of this is a repeat from last time, but I'm going to repeat it every single meeting. That will pave the way for 2026, that will have the development standards will come before you. And then I wanted to point out that the process for all these reviews, you might be picking this up. TAG reviews it, gives it back to Mintier Harnish. Mintier Harnish gives it then, we give it then to steering committee for them to weigh in on, and then it comes to you all. So that's the process for it. We'll do this several times. We'll see this several iterations. But anyway, any questions? And if you would like, I can send out that update as I did with the other one as well.
Any questions from commissioners for staff?
It's late, and so I just maybe were forgetting, but this has to go through CEQA, right?
CEQA was part of the contract for this.
Okay.
Commissioner McPhail.
I think you know what I'm going to say. It's good to get these updates, but it just feels like, these things are happening, okay, we're off to do it. I would like us to have more of a, consideration of these things that are coming up. For example, you mentioned the task force going to talk about administrative provisions and land use matrix meetings. I don't really know what any of that means. And it would be nice before those meetings are held for those of us who are not on the steering committee to have a little update like this is what they are talking about, a wee bit more than administrative provisions.
It makes you feel any better. We haven't
You
been
don't know
involved either. We don't get it until after
Yep.
so the steering committee, so
So
we're all in the dark.
yeah, if there was some way to tee us up for those meetings by having it as a regular item for 1 year on the agenda, that staff could then be ready to say, we're having this meeting and we're going to talk about administrative provisions, which are A, B, C, and D. And we could all say, oh, that sounds very interesting. Could you remember to bring up this thing? But we don't have that opportunity at the moment. And I feel like if we had it as an agenda item, we might be able to be a bit more informed and educated in what's going on. So I'm just making another request for that being on the agenda.
But this is the agenda item.
I know it's an agenda item, but I'm asking for it to be a recurring.
It is. It's been on every week, every meeting.
That's a development code update.
Yes,
It's
it has
on
been.
twice.
Yeah, because we just started doing it. There's
Just last week.
it is a recurring agenda item. I'm just saying, right now, there's nothing
It's
for
under-
them to tell
okay.
us.
If it's a recurring thing, I'm very happy.
Yes, it's a
All right.
recurring
Before
thing.
meetings.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other question? Any other questions for staff?
I have a question just as advisory. So last summer and this summer, the heat hasn't been as bad this summer, but it was last summer. And the medians that we have, the islands that I believe are, and this is where I need your guidance, maintained by the city or paid to be maintained by the city. So say Duval, driving down Duval from Frank Sinatra to Ramon, there's several areas that are islands that are landscaped. The landscapers are doing severe pruning in July, and that puts trees and
I'm sorry,
projects into.
I need to interrupt
This
you
is
just
not-
because we're off the
not
topic
commissioner
here.
comments?
No,
Oh, sorry.
we're still on the staff report, but
Got it. Never mind.
But that's
Bring it
okay.
up again.
yes. Okay. So now we have finished with that item, and we will go to commissioners' comments.
Thank you very much.
So, but I just want to be in the right place.
I appreciate it, yes.
Okay.
It's good to have the structure. So I didn't know, I mean, I know it's hard to educate landscapers, but they are contracted, I believe, by the city, and we pay them to maintain, I believe, so I need guidance. I don't know where this goes. But there's a problem because if you go out there and you drive down these streets, there's large areas where they were once landscaped and there were living plants, and there are now none. And these islands are being denudified, I think is the proper word.
Could I just try and pick that up for you quickly?
Please.
So that's going to be the Works Department that actually supervises that
Great.
contracting. Deanna Presgrove is very reactive to questions. So
That's
I would
fine.
call her, get any information, and see if anything else needs to come back to Planning Commission.
Great, thank you.
All right.
I spoke to Dominique about a future item on the King's School. Since it has limited access, we can't get in. So I believe she sent out a contact that you can make an appointment. And I also asked her to send out the Architectural Review Committee report so that we know what we're looking at, rather than just touring the campus and guessing at what they're going to do. So she's going to send out the Architectural Review Committee report to everybody, and that way you'll have some idea of what their plans are. And you can make an appointment to go in there and see it during the week with the
Great.
person that she gave us the name of.
Thank you.
Great.
Vice Chair.
Nothing for me.
And, okay. And there's nothing from me. So, City Attorney's comments.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Any staff comments?
I've done a lot of talking, nothing else.
In which case, this meeting is adjourned at 9:05 p.m. Thank you, everybody.